don't have to, in Bangkok sometimes all the good food are all so scattered like everywhere.
And it's
quite
hard to
difficult
know where to
travel.
go. Yeah.
So we are happy that they assemble them all together for us.
Well, we're waiting for you, Cheryl. So whenever you
Yeah,
get the green light, you're welcome.
I know. Okay,
Which
let's
island?
see.
Which island are you, Lakeisha? What was the name of it?
I'm
The
on
famous Koh
Samui.
Samui.
There's
that place?
there's the big new shopping mall in Bangkok, Icon Siam, has a bunch of really good street food vendors that they brought inside the place, and they built them this little dreamy Thai village,
right,
like you know how like Disneyland is kind of fake but real. Yeah, they made them this
like an
dreamy
old village, right?
Yeah, it looks like a village with a river running through it with trees. But you're indoors, but it feels like you're in this old Thai village with tree houses and stuff. It's amazing.
And it's air conditioned.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Is that isn't the Siam Mall like the electronics mall wasn't there? Like
well,
I
there's
was there in
several
2011, so I knew that one.
Yeah, there's Siam Discovery. It's all the same owners, but Icon Siam just opened 2 years ago. Maybe 3 years ago, 3 years ago.
I think
But
2019
Siam Discovery,
when I was
Siam
there.
Paragon. Yeah, there are several Siam.
I know. I remember I had to take a boat, like ferry over to that place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we ready?
We actually had a
Siam,
yes.
I guess.
1 minute to talk about
They just named them all Siam. Okay.
Yeah. Same group.
Okay.
Here we go.
Let's do this.
Happy Tuesday. Yeah, happy Tuesday, September 21st. The biggest story of the moment is who downloaded iOS 15.
I did.
I did too. So far, so good.
Too.
Yeah, no complaints.
I've done it for weeks.
Yeah.
Any difference? What is the new different one?
The key differences are you can now FaceTime with anybody, even if they don't have an iPhone.
Ooh.
You can send them a link and say, "Here's me, join me here," and then they can do it from even from their laptop or from their Android phone. It'll open it in a browser, and then they can join you in a FaceTime call. And when you're in your FaceTime call, you can have a blurry background. So it looks like you have a really nice camera. So it kind of algorithmically creates what we call the bokeh effect, where it gives you a near depth field.
I like the focus feature.
Yeah, the feature that Crom's talking about called focus is there's now a button called focus, and when basically the concept is that you have 5 different types of or 4 or 5 or 6 different types of being. Like you have your work vibe, and when you're in work, you click focus, and that says, okay, great. What kind of focus? Work, personal, sleep, exercise, and you're like, work. Okay, so when I use work, that means remove all my social media apps from my phone. Don't even let me see them. Don't send me any notifications from them. Only show me these apps that are relevant to my work. And then when you go to personal, then it removes all your work apps because you don't want to be bothered with work stuff during your personal time. And then you can go to exercise, and you don't want to be, you set up your phone almost like you would set up for a child. You can limit your phone's capabilities to be specific to that focus. And then you can train your phone, what your schedule is so that it will dynamically adapt to whatever mode or focus you are in. So it helps you focus because your phone's a distraction. So that's the interesting thing about calling it focus is they're acknowledging that the phone itself is a distraction and needs to be kind of managed or harnessed or what have you. So that's the focus feature.
Yes, my husband says that he lost his wife to a phone. That's what he says sometimes. So there you go.
Does the audio sound different for anybody, or is this part of the update?
It does have, what do you call it? Spatial audio built in now in the operating system more natively. Yep.
Tyler, but when you speak, it's very clear and loud. And when other people speak, is it because, like me, is it because I'm speaking from an iPhone where you're speaking from the... All right.
It's because I'm using a $400 microphone that's plugged in directly into a laptop, which has better audio processing than a phone and the microphone.
So you're using like what Orca Boy uses.
I think the spatial audio works better if you're using a headphone, because if you're just listening like that, it doesn't really make much of a difference.
Yeah. So the weather app is really cool. The weather app got a notable upgrade.
Yeah, and then focusing on the sleep thing is just different. Like on the personal and work thing, I think that could have been controlled. But on the sleep, it's a lot more sophisticated. So you can wind down. It actually monitors the sleep, and whatever is going to be happening on the phone during the sleep is quite cool. I really like that sleep feature.
And then it tries to hide your email address. When somebody asks for your email address, it'll make a kind of a proxy email address for you. And then in the background, it's doing a bit more proxy of your data so that it's harder for websites to track you with cookies and things like that. So there's a little bit of privacy upgrades in that sense. What else? From a marketing standpoint of privacy. What else?
The URL bar on Safari is now at the bottom. So there's a lot of reconditioning of your brain, but you'll get used to it.
Yeah, it makes more sense to have it at the bottom of your thumb. And generally, it's not a huge change visually. So, pretty simple.
Tyler, yeah. One of the things that we could put into perspective is that, as you just claimed, that it makes your life a bit more private regarding the tracking, etc. But the thing is that now we are totally in the hands of Apple of what they do with the data. The other ones can't do it anymore. You want done.
And that's why Facebook wrote a big New York Times front page thing saying, the Apple is killing, and Google are trying to kill small businesses on Facebook or what have you. But the second biggest story is also about iPhones, but it's about next year's iPhones. The Kuo, the world's biggest Apple intelligence gatherer, now says that an iPhone SE with 5G is coming in 2022, and a cheaper 6.7-inch iPhone, and traditionally that means the 12X, the Max Pro, the Max means 6.7-inch. So there's a new iPhone Max 6.7-inch coming next year. Obviously, that goes without saying. Actually, it says in the first half of 2022. That's really weird. iPhone went and 2 high-end models with punch-hole displays and a 48-megapixel camera. So now that the new phone is announced, they're already on to the rumors of the next one.
Anywho, that may be just speculation, right?
Yeah, he's got a fantastic record, though. So he's pretty much the only Apple leaker who people take very seriously because of his track record. The next one's from the Wall Street Journal. They say they have sources that the Securities Exchange Commission has launched an investigation into Activision Blizzard, including how it handles employees' allegations of sexual misconduct and discrimination. And this is a continuation in the ongoing drama of Activision Blizzard and its employees. And now it's going right back to the beginning, because that was the essence of the whole, what kickstarted this whole drama, was Activision Blizzard's, the makers of World of Warcraft and Call of Duty, and it's easily one of the very biggest gaming companies in the world, has 10,000 employees. There was accusations by female team members that the company had sexual misconduct and discrimination. And so the state of California filed a lawsuit on those grounds. And then things got weird from there. It went into a whole new area of collective bargaining and unionizing of male employees and even part-time, contract employees, not full-time regular employees. And it's kind of pivoted. The focus is pivoted because there's actually more people who were complaining about Activision Blizzard who were not females than were. So the opportunity moved. The goalposts shift. And
now, they haven't unionized yet, because I'm not even,
right.
By the way, as part-time employees, wherever under our labor laws, they can even form a union.
Right.
You know?
I don't think they can. I mean, they can try. I mean, they can get together and say, we're going to leave the company if you don't hire all of us. And there's, 25%.
Oh, yeah. But I don't think they could actually be a union without being a full-time employee. By the way, this issue with the SEC, just to define it for people, the reason they're looking at it is not so much about the salaciousness of the issue, but whether there was a material issue. Could be any kind of material issue. That there was a material issue, but they failed to disclose to investors. So that's the SEC's issue. And sometimes I have to tell you, you get into a lot of gray areas of what's material, particularly on human resource issues, what's material and what companies need to disclose. It's, for example, it's always been it's still an unsettled issue. You have a CEO that gets sick and they're seeking cancer treatment. Some of them disclose it, some of them don't. Steve Jobs eventually did, but he didn't do it, in a timely manner. I know at least one CEO that is now deceased that went to his grave never disclosing what was wrong with him, even though, people kind of who, were more closer to the industry, knew what was wrong with him. But he went to his, grave trying to make himself like the picture of health. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, and you're dealing with human resource issues. And to what extent that they had to disclose or should have disclosed or whatever, I think it's still gray,
Yeah, the article says federal security regulators have launched a wide-ranging investigation into Activision Blizzard, including how the video game publishing giant handled employees' allegations of sexual misconduct and workplace discrimination, according to people familiar with the investigation and documents viewed by the Wall Street Journal. The SEC has subpoenaed Activision, known for its Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Candy Crush franchises, and several other senior executives, including longtime chief executive Bobby Kotick, according to People and Documents. The agency is asking for documents including minutes from Activision board meetings since 2019, personal files of 6 former employees, and separation agreements the company has reached this year with staffers. Records show the SEC is asking for Mr. Kotick's communications with other senior executives regarding complaints of sexual harassment or discrimination by Activision employees or contractors, the documents show. An Activision spokeswoman on Monday confirmed that the SEC's investigations concerns the company's disclosures regarding employment matters and related issues. So is this, Ken, do you assume this has been brought on because the stock has fallen as a result, and investors now want to blame the company for not disclosing something that should have been more transparent with regard to
obviously there's probably some private lawsuits, and obviously it's a big issue, and the SEC could examine whatever it wants. But the issue, and by the way, I think he pronounces it Bobby Kotick, if I'm correct. But in any event, I think the issue is with these separation agreements, employment agreements, there is specific guidance about what employment agreements have to be disclosed. And usually it's a certain level of corporate officer. Most even people who are pretty senior, it isn't required to disclose their contract. But if you ever wanted to see, like Bobby, because he's the CEO, his contract is public information. And the way that you would find that is you go to the company's annual report, and they have a list of exhibits that have all material contracts. Some of them are employment contracts. Some of them are other things. Sometimes if it's something that would be kind of a competitive issue, they don't have to disclose it. But the basic contract of the CEO, the COO, the CFO, that type of thing, the top 4 or 5 officials, their contracts are public information. and you go and you look, and there's an exhibit list, and even if it was from 2 years ago, because a lot of these contracts are 5 years, they'll take you back and they'll say, the employment agreement with Bobby Kotick dated so and so and so and so, reference to this quarterly report from 2 years ago, and it's an exhibit to that report, and then you can go look at that, and you could actually see his contract. You can find out what his severance arrangements are, what his salary is, what his stock option deal is, other unique things that maybe in his contract. But it's only for the top people, and I think a lot of these people who reportedly were engaged in some of these activities may have been, like, say, a senior vice president or some level like that. Typically, their contracts are not disclosed. So therefore, I'm not really sure if there was a separation agreement that it would need to be made public. So these are the issues they're going to get into.
Okay. So next one up is from Bloomberg that Coinbase, the biggest exchange for cryptocurrencies, quietly updates its blog to say it is tabling the launch of Lend, a product intended to pay users interest for lending out tokens after SEC pressure, which we read about a week or so ago. Coinbase was planning to do what all of their competitors do, which is allow you to earn interests by parking your coins in Coinbase, and which is sort of a banking-like functionality, except that Coinbase is bigger than most banks these days, and that, I think, made some banks nervous, and I think they told the SEC, oh shit, here's the beginning of the end. And so the SEC says, if you do that, we'll sue you. And Coinbase said, WTF, bro? We tried to reach out to you many months ago. We even came to Washington, D.C. and requested a meeting with you. And we requested meetings with lots of agencies, and you're the only one who didn't accept our meeting. And we had just IPO'd as one of the biggest IPOs in the history of IPOs. And you didn't want to meet with us, even though we came to your house and knocked on your door. And now we're saying we're going to launch something all our competitors have. And you're saying you're going to sue us? So, okay, so now the update today is Bloomberg says Coinbase updated its blog to say that it's tabling the launch of Lend, its product intended to pay users interest for lending out tokens after SEC pressure. So, the next one is from the...
I really hope... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I said I really hope Coinbase doesn't get on the wrong side. I don't want them to have the same relationship that they had with SEC had with Binance, because because I think Coinbase is the only is probably one of the biggest exchanges, and they haven't had so much bad press. So I just hope it remains that way.
Yeah, well, Coinbase and Binance are taking radically different approaches. Where Coinbase is a publicly traded, they're a publicly traded company. They've got, very highly respected individuals as investors. They're complying. They're trying to do everything to be a good actor. Binance seems to be doing the opposite. They're not complying with every week there's a new government saying, hey, you're operating here illegally, get out of here. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They don't even have an office. It's not even clear who's running the show. It's a very bizarre how Binance is operating. So they're quite diametrically opposed in how they're approaching the whole thing. But that makes sense, because there's kind of two diametrically opposed philosophies about how decentralized finance should work. Some believe, in the spirit of Satoshi Nakamoto, that the whole point of this whole game was to get the power out of the hands of the regulators and put it in the hands of the people, and that the state should have no say in how you deal with your wealth and how you trade with other sovereign individuals. And the question is, who has the power, the individuals or the state? That ultimately boils down to precisely that argument. Are you the sovereign entity, or is the state? Are you a slave to the state or not? To be very blunt about it.
But many times having the state involved, and granted I have my own biases being in the industry, actually protects people.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and that's what Coinbase's approach is we're going to do this. the Satoshi Nakamoto fans, the diehard decentralized power to the people folks, call it the bear hug, where they say the government's going to bear hug it and control it. It still has some of the technical benefits of operating, on the blockchain and everything, but the government actually benefits. They even get more visibility and trackability and data than they did even in the traditional finance system in some ways. And there's essentially two communities developing out of this. One of them kind of radically independent and libertarian, and the other being a little more conservative, for lack of a better word, or traditional, or just improving the existing power structure of things with new technologies. So that might be one way to look at Binance versus Coinbase, where Coinbase is working with the traditional power players. Like, they're trying to comply with the SEC. They're trying to have lunch with the SEC. They're trying to tip off the SEC what they have in mind.
They're a registered broker dealer. I think they may be one of the first ones in this industry to become a registered broker dealer.
Yeah. And where Binance is they're not trying to cooperate with nobody. They're trying to operate the whole thing from a boat in the middle of the ocean. Go ahead.
I think the better approach was what Robinhood took, like actually coupled it with the conventional stocks, and you bring a good mix of like investment opportunity, not just the crypto, but also the conventional stocks. And I think they were sort of like when they were put in the situation where they had to actually put, I think, $2 billion or something like that, 2 to 4 billion. When the SEC came, they said, you have to put down overly within 48 hours, like 4 billion. They sort of like negotiated and they put down 2 billion, and they were better off. I think if Coinbase bring in the actual conventional stock into the equation and mix, I think that's going to be actually taking off some of the pressure over the time it's been built up on them.
Okay, so next up, DoorDash will now deliver alcoholic beverages to customers in 20 U.S. states and D.C., Canada, and Australia. The option for alcohol delivery will be available in Canada and Australia. The DoorDash delivery app will now spirit wine, beer, and other alcoholic beverages to customers. Okay, so now the stay-at-home orders got a little more bearable. The Reuters is up next with the Netflix launches a free plan in Kenya with a quarter of the content from its paid plans, available only on Android phones. Netflix on Monday began offering a free mobile plan with about 1/4 of its TV shows and movies in Kenya. A strategy aimed at kind of looping people in. Not so different from Spotify. Why not have an ad-based one? The Spotify model really seems to work. Those ads really get annoying after a while, and people are happy to pay to stop those annoying ads. And I imagine the same could work in Netflix in new markets. But they must have tried that. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that no doubt they've tried that. But it would, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that I think they have been playing with the pricing because I think it's a different market, and even the dollar exchange here in Africa is really, really, really huge. So I know Spotify was playing around with the pricing because they cannot really charge the same amount that they are charging in other African countries. So maybe that's why they are trying to make the money from the ads.
Yeah, and it says the world's largest streaming video service is looking to add customers outside the more saturated markets, such as the United States, where new subscriber signups have slowed at a time when competition for online audiences has intensified. Exactly right. This has been a massive content land grab. And now that it's saturated in the US, it's going to get more, and it is getting more competitive. And because these players know that they're going to be able to lock in, when Spotify gets a paid subscriber, they usually have them for years. I would love to know what the average length of a Spotify paid user is. I would wager it's more than a year, probably 2 or 3. So
how long has Spotify been around?
Yeah, but my point is, once they have that, what that does is that's a tremendously important, that number, because that tells them what their what's called lifetime customer value is. If they get a paid user, that paid user ends up spending, let's say, $10 a month for 3 years, so $360, right? So if a paid user is worth $360 on average, that means they can spend $300 acquiring users per user. They can, yeah. So that gives them tremendous power to go fight in the marketplace. They're willing to pay way more than another startup whose average user is only worth, $100 lifetime value. So that's why this game is so interesting, because once they lock people in, they stay in for a while, and they know that. So they're just out there rushing. The best metaphor I can dream up is an apple orchard, and there's 10 people, or supermarket sweep, that crazy game show where people are running around the supermarket trying to throw in all the turkeys into their shopping cart baskets. And they're just trying to take all the most expensive stuff in the store and throw it in their basket as fast as possible. I mean, that's what's going on. And once the turkeys are gone, you got to go to the diapers. After the diapers are gone, you got whatever the next highest ticket item is. You just go for the low hanging fruit, rapido, and then now that all the low hanging fruit has been picked, we got to go change to a whole new apple orchard over there in Africa, or they went into India and Southeast Asia. Now they're going into Africa, and that the global land grab now grows into other continents.
Tyler, what you're talking about is called a churn.
Quite interesting.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. That's okay. Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say what Tyler's talking about is called a churn rate. A lot of times companies in various industries with subscription services, whether they're cell phone or whatever, will report a churn rate. They're not necessarily required to, which is another issue. But I just picked this off the web the minute Tyler mentioned it, so I didn't go all the way back into the financials. But according to Statista, which is a service that you can get that has all sorts of different statistics, between like 2018, 2019, Spotify's monthly churn rate, this is just among the paying customers, they also have free services. So this is among the people who pay, was about between 4.8 and 5.8%. So that's how many they they lose per month. Yeah.
And then Carl's tardy, and he's got some interesting questions about percentage conversion of paid versus unpaid and stuff.
Actually, they said per quarter. Excuse me, per quarter.
Well, that changes things by a factor of 3x. Yeah. So with about 5%, 4% per quarter.
Just to read you what's it. It says according to the quarterly subscriber churn rate, because usually these things are reported monthly, but it says quarterly subscriber churn rate of Spotify worldwide from second quarter 2018 to fourth quarter 2019 varies between 4.8% and 5.8% per quarter. According to Spotify itself, the monthly churn rate among premium users in 2019 was 4.6%. Yeah.
Okay.
To me, it would have been interesting if we know the segmentation, because if you are just talking about putting them together and saying the worldwide, it might be like the US subscribers may dilute the African or the Asian, and it would have been nicer to know the rate like by market segmentation. That would have been interesting.
Yeah. If you dig into the financials, you might find it. I'm just trying to do this quick because we're on a call and I'm just Googling the stuff.
Yeah.
But if you tell me,
I wonder what their family settings do to all of this, because you can, if you're in the same household, you can share the account as long as you're at the same sort of address. I wonder if those, when sort of children move out or flatmates move out and whatever, if there's any kind of conversion rate into separate paid accounts, or whether that actually harms them in the long run and people just continue sharing sort of the same account under the family sharing umbrella that Spotify offers.
I imagine they share it until Spotify says, hey, it was similar to Netflix, and this was super interesting,
exactly.
Where Netflix knows that you're sharing your account with your friend or neighbor or sister, or, parents or whatever. And they honestly didn't really care because they want to keep you on the Netflix brand of things and not use their competitors. And they imagine, over time you might decide you'll pay for it, whatever. It's not that big a deal. Until they went into these emerging markets where they'd got, and as this headline says, they're going into, what was it, Kenya, right? And they're offering it for free. And that might seem a little bit strange until you realize, we had heard, because we had one of the early kind of the earliest co-moderators of Tech News Around the World was Ada. And Ada works at Netflix. And he's from Nigeria. And he used to tell us, there was a headline 6 months ago that Netflix was now going to start cracking down on shared accounts, people abusing the sharing of accounts. And he says, yeah, I'll let you in on something that the journalists don't know, which is, we're totally fine with people sharing the account with their boyfriend or girlfriend or what have you, or their parents and whatnot. The problem they were having was in some of these emerging markets, people were enterprising and becoming entrepreneurs and making businesses out of their Netflix account by making timeshares and schedules with people in their neighborhoods, where they would have 10 different houses around the neighborhood, all getting an hour each, every day, or 2 hours each day, and trying to monetize it and make money off of the account, which is, they really don't want that. Well, you can't really do that if it's free. Now, can you? So the Kenya being free, I think I know why the Kenya one is free, because Ada from Nigeria said specifically he knows that they were trying to monetize the account. We can't monetize the account if it's free. People are going to sign up for their own accounts. Very clever. We just got all of you to create accounts for free. And then when we roll out the pricing, we will know, it's kind of an interesting Trojan horse effect to stop people from monetizing their accounts. So,
Tyler, the other piece to that, though, is once they do start, charging people, then it's an opportunity for them to rethink, their pricing model in places like Kenya, where people are really hustling hard, right? So there was a reason that the hustlers were able to monetize off of it, because they created a pricing plan that worked for a certain demographic within that market. So I see it as an opportunity for Netflix, really, in the longer term.
Two other interesting things that could be happening with the free to start with. Everyone who's interested signs up. There's no reason not to. It's free. Holy cow, what a great deal. 25% of Netflix content for free? Why not? So they get to see what the actual addressable market is in the first 6 months of the year. Okay, great. Now let's watch how the usage pattern changes once we add in the option to pay and for all of the content. And let's see how many people, we get to get a real transparency into the real market in a new geography that we don't, that we're just ourselves getting acclimated to. Because if you go in there with the paid right away, you have no idea how many people are creating these ghost accounts, piggybacking on top of, these people selling their access to their accounts. And if you don't know how many people are using that enterprising, so it's quite clever.
Tyler, I was going to add.
Gone. Sorry.
So I was going to add that, I don't know if Spotify knows, but there's already a company called Transient that has a streaming app called Boomplay in Africa that has 70 million active users on the continent, and they've had a hard time monetizing, mainly because of also like the friction in the payment ecosystem, and they were quite early. As you know, in Africa now we're seeing a fintech boom. A lot of these companies like Flutterwave, Paystack, etc., are going to be enabling more frictionless payments. Otherwise, if you try and go through traditional means, people don't have credit cards, or the fees are just too high with M-Pesa, or there's no integration. Even Uber, when they showed up to Kenya, they had to accept cash, or one of the first things they had to do, because M-Pesa wouldn't play ball with them to integrate. So I'm kind of wondering about that. And the other thing, what's interesting about emerging market, particularly in Africa, is that music streaming is one thing because you can do that over 3G or 4G. When you start thinking about movie streaming, like Netflix and others, it gets much tougher because obviously broadband penetration, you hit a cliff very quickly, and mobile connections are 3G, 4G. They're typically urban, and they're getting more rural, but it's still not only accessibility but also cost and price to access that. So unless they do something like Facebook where they make it easier and subsidize it, which will be a tall order, it's hard. I've even looked into the online gaming in Africa. Yes, it does exist, but for the same reasons, right? The bandwidth and connectivity aspects make it super hard to monetize those services, even though there is demand. Just want to add that.
Okay,
But
next.
I was gonna ask Ivana actually. It was I think a few months ago that I was reading that one of the telecoms in Tanzania or Uganda was partnering with a local music app by just immediately acquiring like millions and millions of subscribers immediately because the telecom had a lot of subscribers already, and then the music streaming app already has as well. So by combining and partnering with each other, they were able to get into that like high subscribing audience. If you knew
Yes,
about
that's
that.
the other model, but you're giving away a piece to the telcos there, right? The company's called Ndundo. I actually get invited to the parties. I know the founder. They have these parties every couple of weeks to kind of promote music. The service. They partner with Vodacom in Tanzania. The issue there is that you're essentially giving up something on your marketing side. It's like I call it the pre-iPhone or sort of app store way of marketing. I mean, if you can imagine in the US or Europe before the iPhone, there was no app store. So how would a Spotify grow, right? And all the things that you enjoy, the seamless payments, the app. And so if you're going to a telco, you're essentially having to partner with them to get user growth. And I've done startups where you partner with telcos, and they can take a massive cut. So I worry about the revenue potential for those companies that partner with telcos. Obviously, if a Spotify comes in and tries to do that, it could be different economics they would negotiate. But yeah, it's definitely another model that people have tried to kind of go the telco road. And of course, the telcos try and launch their own music services themselves as well, right? There's a number of them that try and do that as well on the continent. But then they, of course, at some point, they reach up against the Spotifys of the world. And it's going to be very interesting in Africa as to who dominates. The telcos obviously starting to feel like, the heat in Africa, but we saw this in Europe and other places as well, right? The telcos are kind of dumb pipes in the end. They should just focus on providing good internet connectivity.
Okay, next up is from Bloomberg that Robinhood, which is the wildly popular new trading app for buying and selling stocks, and it became very popular because they're not charging any money for doing it, and they make it very fun, almost like a video game. And so a lot of young folks, jumped in. Cost nothing to create an account. Boy, was it wildly disruptive to the legacy players who are clunky old banks who made it feel like a clunky old app and charged money to trade, and there were some exceptions to all of this, of course, but I'm oversimplifying. Anyway, Robinhood IPO'd recently, and now there's a new beta version of Robinhood on the iPhone, which shows code and a wait list page related to an unannounced new cryptocurrency wallet feature. Robinhood is testing a new crypto wallet and cryptocurrency transfer features inside the app, a long-awaited move that will make it easier for customers to hold their cryptocurrencies inside of the app. And this makes all the sense in the world because Robinhood allows you to buy Bitcoin directly. So Robinhood allows you to hold fiat currencies. If you're an American, you're holding your stuff in dollars. You buy stocks, you sell stocks, it goes back into dollars. So it goes from fiat dollars, US dollars, to stocks. Makes sense. It allows you to buy Bitcoin, so you can go from your US dollars to Bitcoins. What happens when you sell your Bitcoins? Why not keep them in Bitcoins? Why convert them back to dollars? Now you can hold essentially in this wallet that was holding dollars. Why not allow it to also hold Bitcoins and other coins that they might eventually sell as well? Coinbase is essentially a very limited, it's an exchange. Robinhood is an exchange for stocks, and Coinbase is an exchange for cryptocurrencies. Couldn't Robinhood also start they do Bitcoin, which is the biggest coin. Why not start adding Ether in all of them? And then you would have Robinhood could become quite a threat to Coinbase. So it's quite interesting having a crypto wallet. It says in the article they're testing the new crypto wallet and cryptocurrency transfers feature in its app, a long-awaited move that will make it easier for customers to send and receive digital currencies like Bitcoin. And that's another great point as well. What if they allowed people to start sending Bitcoins to each other from Robinhood user to one another, or US dollars from one account to another, which they might do. I'm not even sure if they have that feature. Evidence with that gets very interesting because then it becomes a fintech app and you could have companies doing all kinds of really weird things. And the reason that the crypto exchanges are so interesting is because of NFTs, notably, allow for lots of really interesting use cases where stocks are essentially fractional ownership of companies. You have shares in a company. You have, one share. Most companies have 100 million shares, and you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 or 50 or whatever. That's fractional ownership, essentially. You can, with NFTs, you can have fractional ownership of fucking anything, of a baseball card, of a piece of real estate. Even people have put themselves onto NFTs and said, you can have fractional ownership of my dumb ass. You can fractional ownership pretty much anything. And so that's where Coinbase has this interesting opportunity. And maybe Robinhood, whose users are quite crypto friendly, it'll be interesting to see if Robinhood becomes this mega trading app of all kinds. This certainly causes some creative thinking, as I'm doing right now, about what's Robinhood doing here. It's obvious that they needed this to enable this Bitcoin functionality, but it also hints that maybe there's more to come. So evidence of the company's work on such features has appeared in beta versions of its iPhone app. The software includes a hidden image portraying a waitlist page for users signing up to the crypto wallet feature. The app also has code referring to cryptocurrency transfers. That's interesting, because you're no longer just an exchange. That means you're sending crypto to other people, maybe even other businesses. With crypto wallets, consumers can use virtual currencies without having to convert them to dollars. And they also provide a single place for customers to store all of their virtual currencies protected by a private key. Robinhood shares jumped as much as 2% in late trading after Bloomberg reported on the test before pairing the gains. The stock has climbed 7% since its IPO in July, while it jumped 100% at the IPO because all of the Wall Street bet gang thought that it was being shorted at the IPO, and they tried to squeeze it, and maybe they did, because it had this tremendous jump right out of the IPO. While it's already possible for Robinhood customers to buy and sell popular cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Dogecoin, this would be the first time they can manage all of their crypto holdings through a wallet in the app. Other companies include Coinbase, as I mentioned, already offer crypto wallets of their own. And Robinhood Chief Executive Officer Vlad has said that adding crypto wallets is a priority for the company's developers. It's something our teams are working on, he said in a call following the company's second quarter earnings release, noting that the feature is in particular demand among Dogecoin enthusiasts. The ability to deposit and withdraw currencies is tricky to do with scale, and we want to make sure it's done correctly and properly. He didn't disclose when the launch would occur, but the support and the testing in its app suggests a debut could be getting closer. And Robinhood customers also will have the ability to set up two-factor authentication to use the feature to make it more secure. You would definitely need that. Virtual currency trading fueled Robinhood's growth in the most recently reported quarter, making up about 41% of its net revenue during the period, which makes sense because they don't make revenue in the traditional way that exchanges do. They're not charging the customers to buy and sell shares. They're making revenue by selling data about your buying and selling of shares. So it makes sense that much of their revenues coming from the crypto trading. That actually makes sense in this case because they're not your normal type of exchange. The new crypto features are being tested as part of what they call an alpha program. According to information within the code, users will need to activate crypto sending and receiving, and the enrollment page will require an identity check. Here we go with the identities now. Complete the steps to start sending and receiving crypto. Code hidden in beta versions of the Robinhood app have previously been a harbinger of new features. In July, Bloomberg reported on code that indicated the company was working on price volatility protection and recurring orders for crypto purchases. Robinhood launched those features last week. Code in Robinhood's app has also revealed plans for spare change investing and an early deposit option for checking accounts. Okay.
So
if they go down this route, Tyler, somebody, or maybe Ken, who's more sort of knowledge about this, if they go down this route, will they have to declare any crypto holdings that they have legally?
Well, it depends. You get into a really complicated issue because are they being held in what I mean, because crypto is a whole different thing. I mean, if we're dealing with like regular securities, I mean, stuff sometimes gets held in street name for the benefit of clients, and so it really doesn't belong to, the firm. They're holding it for you. And I actually was going to just touch on this. There's different account protections for stocks and bonds and cash. There's something called SIPC, which is, and I'm going to use the term loosely, it's kind of like an FDIC for traditional stock accounts. Like if the brokerage firm were to go under, they'll protect up to a certain amount of cash and even a higher amount of securities. They do not protect commodities and or any cash related to trading commodities, because commodities are not even regulated by the SEC; they're regulated by the CFTC. And I know that we had a call the other day where we got into this debate about whether crypto was a security. The SEC's actually not actually had a formal ruling on it, but one of the former commissioners says that they're treating it, as they are for tax reasons also, they're treating it more like a commodity. But so you're going to have a different level of protection or lack of protection. It's a very complicated subject. The question just got asked. Usually though, you will see the amount. There should be some disclosure about the amount of securities that they're holding on behalf of clients, if that's what the question is, which is different than their own balance sheet, because that balance sheet would be like a parent company balance sheet because it's publicly traded. I mean, because the brokerage firm is a subsidiary. It gets incredibly complicated. I hope that answers it.
So, Carl, this is exactly what happened, and this is a great question because, when all of a sudden, like Elon actually started talking about the Dodge, the only place where the common person could actually, buy a Dodge was Robinhood. Robinhood actually introduced it pretty much straight away, and in fact, like many people, actually came on the Clubhouse because Elon was here, and he wanted to actually have a discussion with the founder about Robinhood, that what SEC actually did with the Robinhood and whatever the scenario was. So that was the live conversation happened between them, because all of a sudden, like everybody actually jumped on the Dodge because Elon was just like playing with it. And here was the way that a common person could actually buy the Dodge. And Robinhood actually provided that mechanism through which anybody could actually buy it, not just going through the normal exchanges. So when that happened, SEC all of a sudden raised a red flag, and they said within 48 hours you have to put in or show us that you have a liquid $4 billion, and God knows, like whoever you are, you cannot actually have the $4 billion sitting like that as a liquid. And finally, the negotiations happened, and I think they put down about $1.5 billion somehow, and then promised that it's going to be like within 6 months they're going to be putting $2 billion more. So that's the scenario, and I think that overall, I saw that coming, that they would come up with some sort of like wallet, because that's the dilemma. Everybody's going to be facing, because you can go crypto to crypto is very easy, and you have a software wallet in Coinbase, but Robinhood is still working in a conventional way because it's an exchange, and many people actually go onto the Robinhood from the perspective that they are the investors, small investors, and they want to do the small exchanges, and some of them are even day traders, like in a private capacity, and every single time you do the transaction, you're going to end up paying a lot. Whereas in Coinbase, if you are just kind of cashing up on some of the buying and selling on the crypto, is free, practically zero transaction fee. So they were lacking on that front, Robinhood was, and now once their crypto wallet is going to come into the equation, it's going to be more or less the similar situation as Coinbase has. So yeah, that's the perspective.
Robinhood's problems, by the way, if you're going back a couple of months ago, had nothing to do with crypto. The reason they had to come up with money had to do with stock issues. The GameStop stuff and all of that, and they didn't have the correct amount of regulatory capital because of stock trades getting settled. Didn't have anything to do with crypto.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on that particular point. But this was the timeline was pretty much same. They were sort of like SEC was just pushing on that. There was too much fluctuation on the actual Dodge. But yes, you were right on that point.
Okay, next one up, Amazon's big event coming up on September 28th. Amazon announces its next hardware and services event for September 28th, 9 a.m. Pacific time, which matches perfectly with when we do tech news around the world. We do it starting at 7 a.m. Pacific time. So, pardon me while I sneeze for a second, but when we start at 7 a.m., we'll go for 2 hours, and then we'll go cut live to this Amazon new hardware and services event on September 28th, and where they say they're going to launch the new Echo devices. Oh no, The Verge thinks they're going to launch new Echo devices. Amazon has officially announced a date for its big fall event, but it's not yet known exactly what it will be, and The Verge thinks it's going to be new Echo devices. Okay, so we will, and then also updates to Alexa's software and Alexa's capabilities. New Aero routers, which is a smart mesh routing system that you can build, and updated Ring cameras and more. Maybe even the rumored Ring drone from a year or so ago, which is a drone flying around inside of your house, which they claimed to be working on. Amazon also tends to announce its more unique and experimental products at this fall event. So yeah, maybe the Ring drone, indoor drone flying inside of your house as a security guard. Previous years have send the announcement of the Echo Loop Ring, the Echo Frame glasses. The Ring drone. Oh, they did the Ring drone at a previous event, so maybe we'll get an update about it. And we may have gotten an early look at the Ring's dash cam as well for cars, Ring for cars. Okay, so the next one is from Vice. It says, Europol, alongside Italian and Spanish police, arrest 106 people accused of working for the Italian mafia and laundering 10 million euros made through cyber crimes. And they're basically doing email phishing, very simply. And what's interesting about that is email phishing scams, used to be done by people who were geeks. And what's interesting now is email phishing scams and doing bad behaviors technologically are getting easier and easier. And now the mafia has gotten easy to the point where, the Italian mafia has managed to get their hands around how to do these kinds of, geeky scams. And now they are, and they're making money doing it. So it's a little easier than their traditional scams that the mafia has done. They're digitizing. They're modernizing. Even the mafia is digitizing. Is what the headline should read. That's what it is. That's what they're doing. They're the Italian and Spanish police and busting Italian mafia for cyber crimes, aka email phishing scams. So the next one's from CNBC. And they say there's analysis that Amazon has doubled sponsored product ads at the top of some search results, from 2 or 3 to as many as 6. Amazon is adding more sponsored product ads to the top of the search results. Sponsored product ads accounted for roughly 73% of retailers' Amazon ad spend. And in the second quarter of 2021, according to digital marketing agency, and ad prices have surged on Amazon as competition has flourished, because people want to be, it's just like Google. This is nearly identical to Google, where people pay to be at the top of the search results. There's an interesting difference, though, which is when you're searching for products on Amazon, people don't distinguish as much between the ads and the organic placed the people who earned their place at the top of the rankings, which is just like Google, based on a very complex algorithm, but primarily based on the reviews in the case of Amazon. Where in Google, the results are primarily based on how many other people are linking to that website for that word that you searched for. So, but yet Google has sponsored ads above, and people tend to ignore the sponsored ads in Google to some degree, but in Amazon less so, and that's why it's become a wildly competitive, lucrative space. You can buy to be the top spot because that can translate into money. So if you search for toothpaste on Amazon, and the top of the webpage will show you a mix of popular brands like Colgate, Crest, and Sensodyne, try a new search for deodorant, and you'll first see products from Secret, Dove, and other big brands. Look a little closer, though, and you'll notice that those listings are advertisements with the quote-unquote sponsored label affixed to them, which you will be hard to, it's quite cleverly concealed. But Amazon's generating hefty revenue from the top consumer brands because getting valuable placement on its biggest e-commerce site comes with a rising price tag. It's an auction, basically. I mean, that's how these platforms work. Google's ad network is based on an blind auction format, and so is Amazon. That's what works. Amazon's generating hefty revenue from the top consumer brands because getting valuable placement on the biggest e-commerce site comes with rising price tag. Here's the quote: "There's fewer organic search results on the page. So that increasingly means the only way to get on the page is to buy your way on there," says Jason Goldberg, Chief Commerce Strategy Officer at advertising firm Publicis. And Publicis is one of the three biggest. There's three ginormous advertising firms on the planet. Publicis is one of them, the Publicis Group out of Paris, which their office is right there at the Arc de Triomphe. If you're going up the Champs-Élysées, the last building on your left before the Arc de Triomphe, that's Publicis HQ right there. And they host the Europe's biggest tech event called VivaTech with friends of mine. And it's a fantastic event. Anyway, for consumers looking for toothpaste,
Tyler,
yes.
Justin Tudor. I can never say his surname. Justin Tudor.
Won the election.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't say it in the morning. My tongue tied.
Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau.
Oh, okay.
Just won the election.
He won the election, but I
but
think
he doesn't
didn't
have
get
the majority.
Okay. So
Tyler,
that's breaking news. Yes, LS. Let me read just a little bit more of this article here. I think we get the point of it. They've grown their ad revenue. There's a chart in this article from CNBC that the ad revenue has grown from 2017, where it was 800 million. Now it's up to 8 billion. So the advertising revenue's grown 10x in 3 years. So it's growing at a very nice clip indeed.
Hi, Tyler. Yeah, I can maybe just add some additional context to it.
Sure.
The changes Apple made recently on advertising tracking.
Yes.
So revenue is actually going to Amazon because they were not impacted by that.
Right.
So a lot of advertisers are shifting from the legacy ad network, like whether it's Google and so on.
Right.
And so a lot of e-commerce are spending a lot more on Amazon. I think that's also part of why they added more advertising space, because they need to increase their inventory offer as well.
Yeah.
And also, just to add quickly on 3 data points, I think one, Amazon, because I've got a board member with AWS, has been doing this AI research for a while. And Tyler, from the consumer, I'll be honest, it's helpful. You can get a product, it's shipping and cost. So sometimes if the product is in Amazon's warehouse, I can get it literally in a day. But if it's a product I was searching for by some other vendor, I'll get it in a week, and I won't do that. And the cost will be the same or lesser.
There's also a little interesting point here, which is these product manufacturers like Colgate, for example, kind of look at it the same way that Netflix does, which is if they can get you using Colgate, people have a kind of lock-in to particular brands. And if they can get you on their brand, they might even be willing to, if they know you are using a competitor's product, they'll happily give it to you at cost, or maybe even at a loss, which is why they give toothpaste to you for free at the dentist office, by the way. But that could play into this whole Amazon advertising thing, because they're paying to sell you something, essentially, because you're going to click on it and buy it, but they're paying quite a lot to be there.
I think when you deal with these giant mega conglomerate companies like Unilever and stuff, I'm curious if, when you go to a grocery store and you buy soda, for example, the store didn't buy the soda in order to resell it to you. Coca-Cola or the vendors essentially consign it, I believe it's called. So I'm curious if these larger conglomerates are consigning their products, then Amazon's more inclined to make revenue off of the ad because they don't need to use cash to generate that revenue. So Amazon generated essentially 8 billion in almost free cash, whereas to generate 8 billion, you may need to sell 24 $30 billion worth of inventory just to clear that much. So I'm curious if these big companies like toothpaste companies are even charging Amazon to get into their warehouses, or if they're just sitting there and paying a commission on every sale. Sorry that was long-winded, but
let me read this paragraph. It says that about the ad prices going up. For brand owners, the price of doing business on Amazon is surging as the company expands its dominance in online e-commerce. The cost per click for Amazon search advertisement was $1.27 in August, up from 86 cents a year ago. So, 80% increase, approaching double. According to a survey of more than 300 Amazon sellers, companies that don't pay the toll are finding their listings buried in search results, because now you have 6 at the top instead of 2. So the real results are pushed down almost below the fold. So it's become a pay-to-play marketplace, essentially. Companies that don't pay the toll are finding their listings buried in the search results. At the same time, sellers are paying more overall to Amazon for things like transaction fees and fulfillment services. Here's a quote. It's not uncommon now for brands to be spending 50% or more of their product price on various fees to selling on Amazon. Now, they're making not that big of a margin on this stuff, and they're paying perhaps it'd be interesting to know the dynamics of acquiring new users from competing brands and whatnot. Competition has also intensified as the result of a rise in Amazon aggregators, venture-backed companies that are raising big money from outside investors to acquire independent sellers. Some smaller sellers are concerned they may not be able to compete against deep-pocketed aggregators, which are bringing massive budgets to spend on Amazon, also in the form of advertising. They're going from competing against other smaller sellers to now competing against massive, well-funded sellers. Yes, this is an interesting evolution of the game of Amazon. It used to be Amazon was a newish platform. Everyone selling on Amazon was a newish seller on Amazon. Now that Amazon's been around for a decade, you have some very seasoned killers who are really well studied in the art of Amazon, and they know how to win in this game. And they disproportionately win, and then they go up and they buy out, they go raise money to buy the people they beat and take them out and aggregate them into their business to consolidate the market. So they become the king of diapers. They won the diaper battle against all their other diaper competitors. They go raise money, they buy out their competitors, so now they own the entire diaper market on Amazon. This is happening. So the people who are left and don't sell to the Diaper King, it becomes, even now you understand how much more difficult it is to compete. As this article says, they're going from competing against each other to competing against massive, well-funded sellers. And so you get these Harvard Business School types who know how to do business. And that's who you're competing against, as, some mom and pop trying to sell lemonade on Amazon. So the game is getting a bit more professionalized, we could say.
And one other point, Tyler, to Chris's point, he's exactly right. I think on a Unilever, they'll lose money, which is why Walmart is still struggling to beat Amazon, because that logistics center is second to none. With the way Amazon rolls their logistics and their footprint, they've actually outbeat Walmart in the U.S. Because they use a lot of automation. So
it says Amazon's placing up to 9 product ads before its display. Wow, of search organic ads. They don't even have to send out emails to get sales. But this is the most consumer unfriendly thing. That's wild. Okay, so the next one is about a startup called ClickHouse, which provides an online analytical processing database management system, raises $50 million led by Index and Benchmark. A New York-based provider of online analytical processing database management system. Okay. The next is from TechCrunch, London-based TrueLayer, which lets fintech apps connect with customers' bank accounts, raises $130 million by Tiger Global. Sounds a little similar to Plaid, and there's tons of, that's a huge, important key in the whole fintech stack of things. Helping fintech apps connect directly with banks, making it very simple. So you built a fintech app. A big part of the friction for you as a fintech app is doing the integration with the banks, similar to if you built a music streaming app. In fact, the real difficult part was getting all of the licensing and dealing with the record labels to get all the content. And then third parties came in and made that a little more magically easy. Similarly, TrueLayer is helping a fintech app do all of the connections with the bank accounts and all of the different banks, of which there's hundreds around the world. If you're a global app, you're gonna spend a few years trying to build the bridges to all of those banks to onboard all of their customers, which they don't really want you to do. Because the next one's, by the way, that could get really interesting. What if Bank of America, if you're a new fintech app and you're a little bit of a kind of a neobank, you do some kind of feature around, and you're like, Bank of America, we want to connect to your Bank of America. You have a user that wants to start using our app. What if the banks all of a sudden is like, no, we don't want you to connect. We don't want to connect with your app. You're going to steal our customer. That could start happening because I think the banks are starting.
Is that legal, Tyler? I'm assuming it's all open.
Yeah,
in the UK, it's all open banking, and you're allowed to interconnect. And that was one of the big things that unleashed the Monzos of the world and all those new banks in the UK. It's open banking initiative that forced the banks to open up.
That might be the case in Europe. I mean, Europe, I could see them doing that. I could see other countries. We'll see. I don't know. Billboard is the next one. India's leading music streaming service, Gaana, Gaana, has seen low paid sub growth, meaning subscriber growth. India's audio streaming market is 38% ad supported, below only China and Venezuela. So only China and Venezuela have higher numbers of ad-supported users, meaning unpremium users. So it's 38% of music streamer in India are ad-supported, and only China and Venezuela are lower. Ad-based listening is booming, outpacing subscriptions. Now streaming service Gaana wants to convert listeners into customers. Yes, of course they do. That's the whole point. So the next one is a cloud identity management provider, raises $130 million, and tech stocks drop amid broader market sell-off yesterday. Boy, wow, the market was down. Like the NASDAQ, the QQQs were down about 3%, quite a sell-off yesterday. And particularly around tech, and it seems to be in some part due to nervousness around the big China crackdowns on things. We'll get into that in upcoming articles here. And what else? Didi's, this is an interesting one from Reuters. Speaking of China, the Uber of China, Didi, their co-founder and president, Jean Liu, says she plans to step down. That's not that surprising because China's been cracking down on Didi very hard. So it's not a surprise she's stepping down. What is surprising is she says the Chinese government will take control of the company, which that was one of our assumptions when this whole Didi crackdown started back in June or July. And it seemed like, oh boy, they're really driving this company hard. I wonder if they'll, take it over. I remember saying exactly that because it kind of is a public utility. It's how people get around the city. That's normally one of the areas that a government manages is public transportation. When it's done at scale, when it becomes ubiquitous, and especially if it becomes autonomous, it could make sense that the government might want to take it over. Well, Didi's co-founder and president thinks so too. So we were not alone in assuming that one. And it was it seemed like a stretch at the time, but it certainly doesn't now. And by the way, there's a separate article I saw that Didi is looking to go into Nigeria. Was a headline today.
That's
Messy?
what I was gonna say.
Yep.
I was gonna ask you.
Right in South Africa.
I tweeted that one yesterday, so I was just wondering if that's what's happening in China. What is going to be the structure or anything like that? When I read that article, that was my confusion.
Check this
Why
out.
are they planning to get into Africa?
Well, now watch. One belt, one road. That's all I would say.
Well, check this out. It gets even crazier than that. So, why is Didi going into China? I'm tweeting out right now an article from Mashable, just came in. And the headline says, "Your car knows too much about you." That could be a privacy nightmare. So there's a whole lot of data to be acquired inside of these vehicles. And China knows that. And that's actually, according to geeks on the ground in Beijing, friends who join us in this room, said the real reason that the government of China cracked down on Didi when they were trying to IPO was they wanted the data. And the first thing they did, that was the issue. And it seemed very strange. When Didi said they were going to do this big IPO in America, and the Chinese cyber authority said, no, you can't. We're doing a data review on you. You don't go do it. And they went and did it anyways. And then China came in. It was reported by South China Morning Post that the government came into Didi's offices and took over the data. That was their focus. And that seemed really peculiar. Why are they so obsessed with the data of Didi? It didn't really make sense until geek friends of ours on the ground in Beijing said, well, what's going on is there was a case where a Didi driver raped a female passenger, and as a result, to prevent that from ever happening again, they require a camera and a microphone to be on all the time in the cars. And that the government, of which the Chinese, the CCP has, hundreds of thousands of members. It's quite unique as a party. Even people say 2 million members, and that they ride in Didi's all the time. That's kind of the main way of getting around for people that have means that can't afford it. That's how they get around. So because there's cameras and microphones in the car, those people naturally are on their phones having conversations in the car, or having a meeting in the backseat of the car, or they're just talking with a coworker in the backseat of the car. So there's potentially a lot of very important national security being discussed in the backseats of Didi's. Hence the importance of the national security sensitivity of Didi's data. Hence, look, watch where this goes. Now that Didi's president and co-founder says the state is going to take it over, and they're launching in Africa. And maybe this is, and Messi knows very well, the Chinese government also provided the African Union building in Ethiopia, where she's based. They offered it as a gift until the folks of Ethiopia realized, oh, wow, all of the servers are running at night, sending all the data to Beijing. Why is that happening? What's going on here?
Also, Tyler, even to kind of complete that for Africa, don't forget that OPay, which used to have O-Ride, which was one of the biggest series rounds raised this year. I forgot how much they raised this year, but that's a Sequoia China-backed, Tencent-backed, I believe, Chinese
founder,
entrepreneur,
yes.
billionaire who's who's there. And Oride got banned in Nigeria for a while. This is like a year or two ago. I think it was 2 years ago. But the OPay side has thrived. But the Oride aspect, the sort of motorcycle sharing aspect, has that hasn't done so well. They're kind of banned in Nigeria, or kind of was overhauled. And then also Chinese investors have backed Safe Boda, which is another ride sharing company in East Africa that does motorcycle deliveries, which also has a fintech side to it. So with Didi going into South Africa, Nigeria, you put together Oride, OPay, as well as Safe Boda investment, and yeah, they're going after mobility and fintech data in Africa, and there's a bit of a race going on. Yeah.
What if I were to
So
tell you?
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I am first.
No, I was going to say that what Tyler just said, that's my concern is like Mbwana said, there are a lot of fintechs Africans are, I mean, Chinese are getting into investing and even becoming founders and things like that. But what I don't understand is Didi, that the data and everything is being nationalized, technically speaking, is trying to look into. I mean, in March, apparently they have been opening offices in South Africa, and now looking into opening in Nigeria. So if
It's
if the leaders are taking control of the data, is Didi gonna collect Africans' data and ship it to the Chinese government? That's my question.
I think it's more to monitor their own people, to be honest. Like, they have risk of people defecting once they're out of the country, and they need a secondary way of keeping tabs. And I'm going to shut up now and listen to Charles.
What if I were to tell you that the history of Uber and Lyft is a lot more interesting than it would appear?
Charles.
And that some of the investors in Uber on the American side, some of them might have connections with different intelligence services, and that those investors, like, say, I don't know, Chris Sacca, for instance, who is suddenly back investing despite having quit. What if I were to tell you that Travis Kalanick, when he brought on Ariana Huffington, who has all kinds of weird relationships with the Russians, or when he brought in SoftBank, which has weird relationships with the Chinese and with the UAE and with, of course, Saudi Arabia. So maybe there's something about governments wanting to know who's coming and going and having a record of that. And maybe the US and China are not so different after all. Just think about.
Okay.
But of course, as you guys know, the CIA would never be involved in creating apps of any sort. No, they would never do such a thing.
There's no data there. There's no data in apps. They're not interested. If the Central Intelligence Agency and data and apps is where all the data is happening, and they would have no interest in that. That would not make any sense at all. So,
right. And there would never be American billionaires that had connections with intelligence agencies around the world. That would never happen, of course.
well, they're not in the Central Intelligence Agency is not really interested in intelligence, like data and stuff. It's just not their thing.
Right. That's right.
Hey, Tyler, since we have Charles here, can I poke him real quick about that interesting headline we heard about a certain Google owner's house burning down and how he's somehow
Yes, that was a weird one. Yeah.
That's the first time I've ever heard of that.
Yeah. So
It
Larry,
sure is interesting, isn't it? You know, it's a very curious thing, all these billionaires who seem to be very interested in New Zealand these days. You know, it's kind of interesting. We should look into the laws about extradition questions for nonviolent offenses with New Zealand, and how New Zealand increasingly seems to be in the Chinese orbit, and how New Zealand is not, of course, a part of AUKUS, which is interesting. Just some things to note. Now, I would say it's interesting, too, you know, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, they, of course, bring in Eric Schmidt, who was himself kind of fired from Google. So something to think about. I know way more about this than I'm comfortable discussing until some indictments come down. Let me just say that.
So next up is our...
I'm sure they were all just hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein because he's a nice guy, right? I mean, obviously. Very friendly.
Oh my God. Tech news is becoming the X-Files now.
Yeah. Twitter Well, that was the head.
Just remember, I said 2 months before the Bill Gates news broke. Chris is my witness. I said 2 months before the Bill Gates news broke about him hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and how that was going to come out in the major press.
I remember that,
But
Charles.
but I think, to be fair, Charles, I read it not to be, antagonistic, but I think what, taking his word on face value, Gates was saying that he had meetings just purely for fundraising for his Gates Foundation, which he does with a lot of billionaires, right? That's how he is implementing a lot of the good things that he does in Africa, especially into
Yes, he
the
seems to have.
anti-malaria. Go
He
ahead.
seems to have a lot of good deeds he does in Africa that no one can actually track the numbers on while he's traveling around on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. I mean, I'm sorry, but like if people want to read about this, they should just Google Whitney Webb. Whitney spelled WHITNEY space WEBB, and you should look up Maxwell, the Maxwell family, and its ties to Microsoft. There'll be some interesting things you'll discover there. So no, I mean, Bill Gates' foundation is now in the control of the United States government, which is why it's starting to actually do charitable things as opposed to pursuing sort of vanity projects. And of course, you saw that Warren Buffett also left the Gates charity.
Yeah, that was
And you,
like 2 months ago. Yeah.
hmm And then you also saw the news, I think it was maybe a few weeks ago, maybe like a week ago, that George Soros was making all these changes at his old foundation. So maybe perhaps the US government wants the charities that are set up by billionaires to, I don't know, actually be charitable. And maybe, just hypothetically speaking, that the leaking of ProPublica, which is a sort of good governance kind of website, maybe the leaking of a number of people's taxes, tech oligarchs' taxes, maybe that was designed to encourage some of them to be more publicly spirited in their charitable enterprises. Just a thought.
I'm pretty sure those things would be investigated or whatever. But I can tell you, being on the ground, I even know specific projects that I can tell you in terms of the anti-malaria, in terms of even the vaccinations, even the kids that benefited from it, or even being saved. So I know there could be many other things, but a lot of good has been done in Africa on the ground, in Ethiopia, that on the ground. Even the Gates Foundation has funded a lot of agriculture-based products, agriculture-based solutions that helps a lot of smallholder farmers. And I'm sure there are a lot of things, but these are the things that I have seen on my own eyes. So it's not I read or anything like that. So there are specific projects that I can talk to you about. So
Well,
I'm sure.
Gates, by his own admission, he's publicly written and said that he's failed on almost every project he's undertaken in Africa when it comes to actually reducing malarial rates, when it comes to reducing HIV/AIDS rates. So I think that's actually detailed in the Netflix documentary, the 3-part series about him, which of course, everybody knows Reed Hastings connections. And of course, one wonders about that 3-part series and sort of the authorizations around it. It's not to say that there isn't a lot of good things that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has done. It's to raise the larger question of to be somewhat skeptical of people who, shall we say, sort of, profess all the good deeds that they do, that there might be cover for other things going on as well. And of course, as you well know, Messi, there's all sorts of projects in Africa that pretend to be charitable projects, but are, of course, intelligence projects or others. Right? Beware foreigners bearing gifts, in other words, even if they're anti-malarial
Yes,
gifts.
absolutely, absolutely. There are a ton that we all actually talk about it in the impact investment. I don't know if Florian is here, in many rooms, the whitewashing, the greenwashing, you name it. There are a ton. We all complain about it, but I'm also saying that there are some goods that came out. Even the COVAX in Africa, what the vaccination rate were where actually yesterday I saw that from WHO, 75% of the vaccination went into 10 developed rich countries. 10, you can count them, while Africa is still struggling. And the overall vaccination rate is 3.5, in some countries 1.8. And even that immediately came to Ethiopia and other countries was COVAX, which was funded, organized, facilitated by the Gates Foundation. When actually COVID started, they said and mobilized the pharmaceuticals to have a global vaccination centers. And those are the few ones that came in first before, Pfizer and other just a couple of months ago donated by the US. But that's all I'm trying to say. There have been some good that came out. So let's not cancel the whole thing out. There are a lot of bad things that happens, a cover for NGOs and other things. But I'm also saying that the Gates Foundation, I have seen, and implementers, I have seen them, the headquarters here in Ethiopia. I even know their office. I know the general manager. I've talked to him myself personally. So I'm just saying that there are some good that came out. That's all.
Let's get
Thank
into
you for that
this.
perspective,
Yeah,
Matthew.
thanks. Yep. The next one, our friend Jane Wong in Hong Kong, as she's known to do, has found another upcoming Twitter feature, which will be Twitter's working on video playback speed options. So you can now play Twitter video like YouTube. You can enjoy different variable rates of playback speeds. And it's now, somebody found a really interesting new feature in the new iOS 15 that everyone is likely downloading today, which is, I just tweeted this out to the Tech News Twitter account. You can see this feature where you can hold any image on any website. And as you hold the image with your finger and press and hold, it makes the image a little bit opaque and lets you know that you can drag and drop it into other apps. So you hold the image, and then with your pointer finger, your index finger, then with your thumb on the same hand or on your other hand, open a separate app. The image moves with you to the other app, and you drag and drop the image into the other app, the ghost image. Then you can drop into a chat app, Facebook Messenger or iMessage, or into a note or whatever. So you can now drag and drop images and links between apps, or pretty much even out of your photo, your album, your photo album, the photo app itself. You don't have to copy it, save it, and then
You can
place it.
probably, it'll probably happen. I haven't tried it yet, but it'll probably happen between devices. You can do the cut and paste from a Mac straight into your phone now, where, your brain tells you it's not supposed to happen, but you still try it and it works now. And you're like, holy shit. So I'm curious if you can do this drag and drop from device to device. That would also be probably the next
Of
game changer.
course,
I wonder if
there's
this
already
bypasses
solution for
the.
this.
Oh, sorry, Cheryl. I wonder if this bypasses the sharing API then, because obviously if you're in like Twitter and you want to share something over, you can just copy the image, but a lot of people are just going to click it and then click share, and then Twitter, then it goes through the API to share it to Signal or whatever. I mean, if it completely bypasses that, I wonder if there's any effect to the data that the original app gets access to. I don't actually know how the API works on iPhone.
Okay. So the next article is from Verdun, who joins us from India, and this one's from Business Insider India. It says the U.S., India, Japan, Australia to sign a pact for stepping up chip production, reduce dependence on China. The U.S., Japan, India, Australia are likely to sign an agreement to take steps to build secure semiconductor chip supply chains when they meet, probably at the UN General Assembly that's happening in Manhattan on First Avenue right now. So all the world leaders are there now. Might as well talk about chips. Anyone have any problem with chips? How you guys doing? You all good? How's it good? What, you guys got? Anyone need chips? I got chips over here. Let's make a deal about some chips. No doubt they are going to be talking about semiconductors. It's at the front of everybody's
Tyler,
mind. Yes.
I actually tweeted you a tweet about that the chip shortage will come to an end in 2023 with probably a huge overproduction as well. I tweeted about half an hour ago, so from my account.
Okay.
The thing is that since we're ramping up the production, we will come to that we will saturate the market. This will probably not lead to the prices dropping. Instead, they will probably shut down a few factories during the period they have overproduction as usual. Because, there is no shortage of need of money, Johan Dan.
Well, we can't talk about chips and not talk about Taiwan. And Jeff G sends in this one from the Taipei Times, that Taiwan warns China of World Trade Organization action, which is a UN body, World Trade Organization. And Taipei threatens to take China to the World Trade Organization yesterday after Beijing said it would suspend wax apple and custard apple imports from Taiwan due to pest concerns. China's customs. So, a little tit for tat happening on apples in the World Trade Organization. So, next one up is from Verdun again, out of India, that they say they have Reuters says it has an exclusive that the U.S. trade official called India's MasterCard ban draconian. That indeed India did kind of shut down MasterCard in India because India is saying you got to store all the data in India. Sovereign cloud issue yet again. So the question is that reasonable? And now the U.S. is saying that India's MasterCard ban was draconian, according to Reuters. And Nalormi sends one in from TechCrunch that Pakistan ed tech startup called Maqsad gets $2.1 million pre-seed to make education more accessible in the region. Fantastic. Ed tech in Pakistan. Love that. That could be huge. And CNN reporting that a mobile app is helping Afghans navigate Kabul following the Taliban takeover. As the Taliban entered Kabul last month, the team behind the crowdsourced news alert app called Etisab deserted their offices, but they continued working, and now there's a mobile app to help Afghans navigate Kabul. And Aldi, which is, for the Americans who don't know what Aldi is, you can think of, Kmart, I guess, would be the American closest equivalent to Aldi, although it has groceries as well. And we
have them here.
Yeah, and they're kind of booming, by the way. Aldi has chosen London for its first checkout-free tech trial. Amazon has
Hey,
been...
Tyler.
Yes, May.
It's May. Correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I saw this somewhere. Isn't Aldi, isn't Trader Joe's also part of Aldi's corporation now?
Yeah, they were started by, I think, two brothers. And so one led the Trader Joe's brand, the other has Aldi. They're both driven by private label products, primarily in grocery.
Aldi's in Germany.
Yeah.
And it's also quite, in Netherlands, Aldi is like Lidl, which is basically a low-cost location to buy. But Aldi has also converted their Aldis in the United States to be organic, whereas the shops here in Europe are not. But the Aldis in the U.S. have been focusing on organic, and that's, Lakeisha, thank you for that, because I was ruminating in my head that there's something connection with Aldi's and Trader Joe's. So yeah.
I didn't know that.
They started to diversify, and it was really interesting because they used to be really like Kmart for groceries, but all private label. And probably 4 or 5 years ago, they started, and primarily in lower socioeconomic communities. And probably 4 or 5 years ago, they started buying property in, middle to upper middle class communities, and they sell wine and organic food. So I think that they're trying to maybe go after some of the, maybe not the Trader Joe's market, just because people are I'm actually searching for Trader Joe's products here in Bangkok because I am running low on my rosemary mint conditioner that I like to use. But nonetheless,
give me a heads up,
Lakeisha,
I'm right down the street from one.
Well,
send it right over.
Aldi's a German company. That's why
Yeah.
I asked that, Lakeisha, because of the fact that all of these mergers and acquisitions and hypermarkets that are in Europe, for example, Aldi, Lidl, Albert Heijn, Deleuze, Carrefour. I mean, Albert Heijn is massive in Belgium because it acquired Deleuze, and Albert Heijn, which is Dutch, owns Stop and Shop. So it's and a couple of other grocery stores in the United States. And this is why I was bringing it up, because that movement of Aldi and that organic approach that they had as an entry to the United States was what you're speaking of, Lakeisha, because Aldi was going organic in the United States when they decided to do this about 2 years ago from Europe, because I was interviewing for that project to help them with SAP rollout. So there is an element of it that this was already in the talks. I'm just very curious because, similar to you, Lakeisha, and what Chris said, I'm making note how close Chris is to a Trader Joe's, that I would love to see something of a Trader Joe's in Europe. But I do believe if anyone's going to be able to pull it off as a country first, it would be London, because there's so many expats and there's so many people there that would, like Lakeisha, you stated, there's some much more, a little bit more health conscious neighborhoods where people want to be able to buy healthy foods and products, and they want sustainability and fair trade. And I think that whole vibe is in like Kensington and Chelsea and stuff like that. But I know that Germany's doing these supermarkets now without any plastic, without any, so is Netherlands. They're doing like these markets where they're moving back to like Wild Oats that was in Austin back in the mid 90s, which was acquired by Whole Foods, which was Wild Oats was the pre Whole Foods where you could get product at bulk, right? And they're moving back to that in Germany and in Holland. They're also looking to make those models of grocery stores and refurbish them and bring them back to life to save for packaging and plastic, because that's where these like Aldi's and the such here, they still have a lot of groceries packaged, produce packaged in plastic, which doesn't make sense to me.
The
But
other
anyway.
quick piece to that, I mean, tying back to this article that Tyler was reading, is that Aldi's has always had a low labor count. So they might only have one or two people that are on call who are actually working the store. So it's very much self-serve, and customers have to pay a quarter to use the shopping cart so that when they return it, they get their shopping cart back. But I think it really speaks to how they entered the US market. And so it doesn't surprise me that they're going to start piloting with, checkout that doesn't involve people, because they've really been really, they've never really relied on a lot of labor to run their stores.
Lakeisha, that's totally fascinating, because Netherlands, it's unheard of now that you actually see cashiers in the store. I mean, you do see like one or two at the Casa, but basically Albert Heijn's been doing self-checkout for like about 4 or 5 years now in their grocery stores. Actually something really weird for me to see, which was when I came here, which was back in 11, it was not there yet, but over the course of 3 to 5 years after I arrived here, they already started migrating to self-checkout. And what's really interesting about what you just said, Lakeisha, is that during COVID, they went balls to the wall to do more of that in more places, which is interesting. When they shut down, I was like, what happened to all the stores? Like literally they got a revamp. After COVID, when the Dutch opened up some of their Albert Heijns and their Jumbos, they had a whole new setup at the cashier area where they had about 12 self-checkouts and now 2 lanes. Whereas before they had 4 or 6 lanes and 4 self-checkouts. Now they tripled their self-checkouts and they cut down by 50% their cashiers.
Interesting.
I think
Okay.
Aldi also
I need.
partnered. One last thing about Aldi, they did partner with Instacart, I think, in Ireland, and yeah, I believe that they're looking to partner with others for home delivery in other countries they serve.
I knew the real Trader Joe, who died in 2020, Joe Colum. And he died in Pasadena from San Diego originally. And he said his biggest regret in his life was selling to Aldi's, just to be clear about this. And I think he writes about that in his book. I haven't read his book yet, but he used to give talks and used to talk about like investing and running businesses and that sort of thing back when I went to school in Claremont. So his big success, why he was really, very successful, was that he trusted and wanted to make his employees rich alongside him. So the idea of just replacing all of these very knowledgeable, workers at Trader Joe's with a bunch of robots, I think, well, it's a good thing that he's dead, that he doesn't have to see that.
He might be rolling in his grave, Charles.
Well, not only are they knowledgeable, they're really helpful and friendly. Like they watch a lot of Romper Room, probably as adults. Yeah, it's an experience.
Yeah, I will
Okay.
say, I've become through him I became a huge student of grocery stores, and it's amazing just how so many of them have sort of criminal ties in the past, things like money laundering and all that kind of thing. And Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and sort of like this whole movement to like give the customer more information about the kind of food he's eating or she's eating, is really, really, really important stuff. And I think it would go a very long way if we imparted some of the lessons of Joe and John Mackey and others to dealing with the sort of antitrust issues in big food that we're experiencing today. I just heard a statistic earlier that a big chunk, is somewhere around 60 to 70% of the deaths that the United States is experiencing due to COVID is due to malnourishment, insofar as the people are fatter than they should otherwise be. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Mississippi, our fattest state, or at least one of our fattest states, has a per capita death rate on par with, if it were its own country, I think, as was stated, it would be just below Peru, which has a genetic predisposition to COVID. So I just think it's interesting how these entrepreneurs really kind of can take us out of the Stone Age so that we eat well and have more meaningful lives. It's really interesting, and I hope we don't lose that as we move into this world of high labor costs and therefore more automation. I don't want to live in a world where everything is Walmartified or everything's a vending machine. I mean, Japan's a perfectly wonderful country, but that's not the kind of country I think the United States should be.
Okay, next up. So we got the Aldi one. Aldi's going to do fully automated stores. This is the short headline there. A British baby shortage. This is from The Guardian in the UK. The British baby shortage could lead to economic decline. Yeah, that's exactly right. Social Market Foundation suggests measures including better childcare provision to increase birth rate. Oh boy, so now the birth rate issue is spreading to the UK. Britain is facing a baby shortage, and that could lead to long-term economic stagnation. Yes, exactly. That's why the CCP is so incredibly focused on exactly that issue. The Social Market Foundation said the birth rate was about half what it was at the post-war peak in the 1960s, and the country's aging population could lead to economic decline. Yes. By the way, UK, you're not alone. It's the entire developed world is in a terminal demography of declining birth rates. The entire developed world. Mexico is unique in that it's not a declining birth rate country. So the entire economy of the planet is dealing with this issue, believe it or not. It's just starting. Most people are not aware of it yet, but just like I've been ranting and raving about water stress is going to become a huge issue, so is the declining birth rates. And China, as usual, is the first to come to terms with the data and start making policies very firmly about it, as they are known to do.
What are the key places, Tyler, where automation won't help? Like, if you've got less workers to do physical jobs, manual jobs, sort of low-wage jobs, that kind of thing, you can automate a lot of it. Where are the top 2 or 3 that you know about that just automation won't help? There isn't a solution that we have.
I think automation will help, but it comes with it doesn't solve the problem completely, because it creates a separate new problem, I guess is one way to think of it.
And Tyler, if I can jump in, it's just macroeconomics. I think we're just going to need to change, hopefully it will at some point soon, change the economic structure globally. Because China and the developing world, Harry Dent talked about this in the demographic cliff, coming of age where most of the Western worlds are, they're just approaching 60 at a growing rate, and they'll live longer. And then beyond that, what you're going to need to do is see the economic structure. Because in China, I know personally, a lot of them didn't want to. Someone's on hot mic. In China, they didn't want to work. They didn't want to get married, and this was about a year ago
It's Amy.
because it was too expensive, and people were like, they were professionals, but they're like, we're not going to get married because it's just too expensive if you're like 25 and you're trying to build your life.
Well, the government needs to start changing a lot of these situations. They need to crack down on landlords who are essentially mobsters extorting people in rents, which is what we see in California. And it's why, Trudeau just, was reelected because he called for moratorium on foreigners buying housing stock. I mean, in the United States, $70 billion worth, and that's what we know of. The real number is probably way higher. $70 billion worth of real estate is owned by foreigners. Why? Like, how is that permitted? And the issue is when it comes to the real costs of being middle class. I mean, when you add up healthcare costs and you add up education costs, which we could go on and on about the overpriced education in the West. When you add up healthcare, where we're being gouged on drug prices, across the board, and you add up healthcare, housing, and education, all those things essentially, and then you live in a city that has sort of quote unquote good jobs, not like in the Midwest or not on the not in Texas. You're looking at the essentially not having much money saved at all. So who can afford having children? And this affordable family formation issue is something that writers like Steve Saylor were talking about way back when. And it's an issue where that if it's cheaper to have homes and it's cheaper to have families, you'll have more people having families. But the government has a role to play, not just in bribing people to have children, which is what they've tried in China, and to some extent I guess they try in the US, which I think is there's something to be said for it. But it also has a role to play in actually going after criminal behavior that artificially increases the costs associated with being middle class. And that means antitrust. That means that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think the Biden administration is actually much more sensible about this than the Trump administration ever was. But I do wonder how the advisability of importing in the United States 1 million people a year while we're not increasing our housing stock. I mean, that's crazy. That there's no other country in the world that does that sort of thing.
But to Carl, to your question, the biggest concern about declining birth rates isn't about the productivity per se. It's that the economists made these models, 50 years ago when populations were more traditional with, more young people. And the idea was, those people's Social Security payments would pay for the retiring older people. And there was this faulty assumption that there would always be less older people than younger people. And when that pyramid shifts and inverts, now there's less people to pay the retirements of more older people than the less younger people. Now there's no Social Security system, essentially, is to oversimplify the issue. And so that economy doesn't quite scale. You'll have to tax the labor of robots essentially to make up for that. But
And one final thing, Tyler, it's kind of sad, but millennials in the U.S. mostly, 94% have no wealth and 6% is controlled by, actually I think they call it the silver economy.
Well, this is the point, is that exacerbates the haves and have-nots when you start replacing the humans with the robots. The person who owns the robots, you can own robots and their productivity more than you can own people and their productivity. So it creates a kind of exacerbates the wealth disparity issue in some sense as well.
I think we also need a conversation about mandatory retirement, which is an issue that we've sort of had a hard time discussing in the West because, as we all know, the baby boomers, of course, never age, and they're of course the same spry young things that they were in the 60s, right? Which of course is just self-evidently not true. And so one of the problems of having an older population that doesn't hand over power to the younger generations is that you have all these issues where people inherit property, they inherit assets, when they're well into their 50s and 60s. I mean, that's happening in some sense now. So we need to have a lot of conversations about end of life care as well. I mean, I know Sarah Palin got in trouble for calling it death panels, but there is something to be said for the inadvisability of a healthcare system that's focused on the last few years of life of 90-year-olds versus the actual health and well-being of younger people. So that's, I mean, these are just sort of obvious things. And of course, one could obviously point to the COVID issue as prima facie evidence of this, right? I mean, in COVID, you have all these people who are getting locked down, and of course that had all kinds of negative effects on the millennial population and on younger Gen Z, and of course that was at the expense of we did that basically to protect older people to large extents and immunocompromised people. But of course, those people are some of the people that have the most wealth in the country, particularly the older ones. And so there should be really an interesting question about to what degree do the older generations owe the younger generations for taking it on the chin, particularly when the older generations had all kinds of benefits, such as cheaper cheaper housing, cheaper, of course, cheaper education. I mean, these are real intergenerational equity questions that really need to be addressed.
So the next one up is SoftBank leads a $680 million funding of a blockchain NFT game at a $4.3 billion valuation. Sports non-fungible token platform Sorare raised $680 million. That's a huge round at a $4.3 billion valuation.
Tyler?
Yes.
So Rare was the NFT platform I told you about with the European players.
Yep.
Because I'm working with a European soccer player with his NFT, and that is So Rare is the platform for the trading of the cards of the players from FIFA and UEFA, and it probably raised quite a bit considering that it is also taking other players in, and they're really getting aligned with it from a player perspective.
Mark it down right now that you'll be reading about all the criminal conduct of SoftBank in a year's time. I just want to be on record. It's September 21st. It's about 2:49, a.m. in Texas. And I want to go on record that a year from now, we'll be talking about SoftBank engaged in all kinds of money laundering and criminal espionage related content. That's all I have to say about that.
So, yeah, that's a generous. The way they're spending money, there's something happening.
Have you ever heard of shit like this in your professional life, Tyler?
No, this one's a little weird. So,
because WeWork was such a normal company, right? Of course.
They were forcing
and
them.
Of course, nothing strange happened with SoftBank and Uber. No, that was all on the up and up.
He has points here. SoftBank is way overpaying for things, offering more money than the founders want or need, and it's a little peculiar.
And that SoftBank Anyvision deal, perfectly normal. SoftBank's relationship with Sheldon Adelson, who of course has no issues with Macau and money laundering and all of that, and his involvement with Sheldon Adelson and Trump. Of course, none of those things happened. You can just go about your regularly scheduled programming.
So next one up is Evan. You have this one.
Charles is like the Forrest Gump of corruption. Everything with his groundbreaking story, and then that's all I've got to say about that.
So Evan sent in one from MIT, the next generation of glowing plants. Using nanoparticles embedded in plant leaves, MIT engineers created a light-emitting plant that can be... Holy shit, what's the movie? Where they're in the jungle with the glowing plants? Avatar, here we go. We got it. We did it. MIT engineers created a light-emitting plant that can be charged by an LED. After 10 seconds of charging, the plant glows. We got glowing plants, folks. These plants can produce light that is 10 times brighter than the first generation of glowing plants. We wanted to create a light-emitting plant with particles that will absorb light, store some of it, and emit it gradually. According to the engineers at MIT, this is a big step toward plant-based lighting. Holy smokies. Creating ambient light with renewable chemical energy of living plants is a bold idea, says the professor of MIT, author of a paper who worked on it. It represents a fundamental shift in how we think about living plants and electrical energy for lighting. The particles can also boost the light production of any other type of light-emitting plant, including those the lab originally developed. The plants use nanoparticles containing the enzyme luciferase, which is found in fireflies, to produce light. The ability to mix and match functional nanoparticles inserted into living plant to produce new functional properties, an example of emerging field of plant nanobiotics. So this is genius. You take the gene of the firefly light and you put it genetically engineered plants to be like massive fireflies.
You know, this luciferase is like the cornerstone of the anti-vax movement, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I got to tweet this article out. This is beyond brilliant.
Because the rumor was that the vaccines had luciferase in them, so that they could point a black light at your injection site and tell if you've been vaccinated or not. And so the fact that this is coming up again is just, I know what it is, but it's just the worst possible name you could have picked. Lucifer,
right.
luciferase, end times, sure, and all that.
But all that aside, if we have what the avatar like glowing plants that don't require energy, I mean they store sunlight during the day and then emit it during the night. Holy cow, that's kind of freaking genius. So anyway, I want to be the first to have glowing plants. Using specialized nanoparticles embedded in plant leaves, MIT engineers have created a novel light-emitting plant that can be charged by an LED. In this image, that means it can be charged inside your house without sunlight. So in the image that they show, the green parts are the nanoparticles that have been aggregated on the surface. So super cool. Okay. So next up is this one also from Evan, the Royal Seal of Approval, another vertical takeoff and landing company, hydrogen-powered vertical takeoff and landing, democratizing air travel to protect the environment and decarbonize travel. It's called, I'm tweeting this out. It looks like a helicopter, like a luxury helicopter, except that the blades are 4 or more, 6 or 8 blades, like a drone, like a personal drone, like a DJI drone, instead of one big blade, circulating blade on the top. It's a bunch of blades around, with arms. And there's a whole bunch of those vertical takeoff and companies booming. And Evan sends in this one from Singularity Hub that foldable houses cost $50,000 and go up in a day, like 3D printed homes. Boxable's innovation seems promising as a source of affordable housing and could become a major new player in the industry. Absolutely. A $50,000 house. That's totally reasonable for many people who can't afford a normal house. And they're hopefully stackable, hopefully very high. So we can just continue to build affordable housing, because if it costs $50,000 to buy, what would it cost to rent per month? Would be an interesting question.
$50.
I would maybe more, maybe 100, 200, 300. But at least you're getting this huge issue of affordable housing is going to become a massive issue very soon. So this is an incredibly important kind of solution. This affordable housing solution is going to become incredibly critical in the very near future. So
you should be aware that the infrastructure around it actually can kill such a project: roads, sewage, water, electricity, etc. So the thing is that just because you solve the housing doesn't solve the rest of the crap around it. Sorry to say.
Yes, but perhaps we need to get into more off-grid, forcing people to live in off-grid ways. Like they need to have a solar panel for this thing. They need to have a water catcher for it. They need to have a waste, their own waste scenario, and so that it's not more of a burden on the city, and the city just needs to make sure that they have that stuff in place. I mean, Lakeisha can tell you, she came and saw my place. Like I'm fully off grid, so it's not hard. It's easy. It's luxurious if you want it to be. If you can use it in ingenious ways. You use the wastewater that comes out of the shower to grow your vegetables. What's the problem? So it just requires a little bit of work. They're called seeds. You put them in the ground, they grow. So,
And Tyler, you're speaking such the truth, though. It's kind of sad because you talk about these immigrants from Haiti or everywhere else, and we have enough land in the U.S. And to Charles back channel me on something else, it makes a lot of sense, but it is economics because these cities, at least in the U.S. and these countries, they depend on tax revenue. And, we'll belabor the point, but they want that old system to say, well, you must be in our city zone and we need your tax revenue and your e-commerce and everything else versus affordable housing that's self-sufficient and more environmental friendly, so we don't have these droughts and all these other damn issues we keep creating.
How are utilities structured within cities in the US? And the UK, it doesn't matter really where you are, everything's privatized. So your utilities companies that you can go to, gas, electric, are privatized, and you have a choice of who you want to go with and whatnot. Like, how is it in the US, or is it run and distributed?
You don't.
Like the
It's by
city?
district. You don't have a choice,
The
Carl. Yeah,
municipalities,
yeah.
they
Go ahead,
strike
Chris.
deals. They strike deals with private enterprises to cover certain geographic areas. In the case of large power systems like electricity, they tend to be run by giant companies like Southern California Edison, if you're down south, or up north Pacific Gas
So
and Electric.
so corrupt. So
Yeah.
corrupt.
And then
So
water is probably the most distributed, where a town over might have a totally different water system than you. But the utilities, you're pretty much bound. The only freedom you have in any services are really limited to your internet and your television providers.
my
And
follow-up
Carl,
question
even
to
the
that would,
water, you share pipes by cities to answer
yeah.
to Chris's point. So even the water, you can have like Newport and Huntington Beach. They actually share the same piping. So you'll have that. And so it's still sort of a conglomerate.
So my follow-up question to that would be, does that make it easier or harder to get to a place where whoever is providing you the utilities will allow you to do what Tyler's saying? Because that's the issue in my mind that I see, is that, yes, it'd be wonderful if we're all off-grid. It'd be wonderful if everybody's using solar panels and everybody's using their own water supply and whatnot. But there's a vested interest in these companies to not facilitate that and to get in the way as much as possible.
Depends on where you are in the country. I mean, in the UK, you guys have a lot more forced density than we do in the US, so it's complicated. I mean, Texas has its own grid even when it comes to energy. So it's very regional specific. It's very town specific even. But yes, I mean most places now you can kind of have your own solar panels. You can buy your own lithium ion batteries, and the batteries are getting cheaper all the time. I'm sure Tyler knows
yep,
full well that how cheap they're getting. And particularly, you probably have a lot of the Chinese ones over in Thailand, right,
yeah,
Tyler?
yeah. I use German
Yeah.
ones, but the Chinese ones are starting to take off. And Thailand has this. The prime minister would, if you ask the prime minister what's his number one dream, it would be to make Thailand like go huge on lithium batteries specifically, because a lot of by the way, when we talk about the chip shortages on cars, turns out that Thailand this is absolutely one of Thailand's biggest export is car technology. And there's quite a bit of cars manufactured in Thailand. And if Thailand knows they want to switch over to EV, they know the car companies want to go into EVs. So Thailand wants to make the lithium here, which would be great because it would make it much easier to do energy storage, for everyone here in Thailand. So,
So just a little bit on the US side. Okay, so first of all, you cannot actually have the panel without the consent of the actual electric supply company. So you have to actually have the reverse metering done in order to actually have the panels. So that's insane. It is basically. So tomorrow, if I decide just to actually have the panel and just go off grid, and I don't want the electricity, I have to actually. There's no way around it. They wouldn't let me do that. That's one thing. In terms of the actual water supply, I have my own well and I have my own septic tank. And the only reason is that the water supply is not just simply available in the area. Otherwise, I could not even have my own well or the septic tank. And if I try to actually put my propane tank, the same company who actually deals with the electricity also deals with the gas. So they wouldn't allow me to actually have the, propane tank of my own. And that's how it is everywhere pretty much, unless you're literally living in boonies where there's no infrastructure, nothing. Um, it's just insane, basically. If you compare that with the UK, you have like tens of suppliers, although the supply is going to be coming with one supplier, but there are private contractors who would actually be doing the subcontracting for you, and then they compete on the pricing. So God knows where this like anti-competition law come in or kicks in or whatnot.
But let me make a point. At least in the United States, the reason why we have, say, a single utility company in a particular region, usually they're private, by the way. They don't have to be. They could be municipally owned. Los Angeles, by the way, if you live within the city
Yep,
limits,
you're right.
your electricity and what right, it's municipal, and your rates are lower because they use tax-free municipal bonds. So this, LA DWAP actually has lower rates than Southern California Edison,
Yep.
but that's very micro. But the reason I wanted to make this point is that it was thought at the time, a long time ago, when these things got built, that the capital investment was so large that you had to give somebody a monopoly to justify, this large fixed cost, to build all of this stuff out. You couldn't necessarily, justify having, multiple competitors because they would all go broke. And so that was the concept why there's generally single utilities, for a lot of things.
But the
I just
Ken,
tweeted
that's what
out.
exact
I just tweeted out a few photos of life off the grid in Thailand.
Ken, basically, that was exactly the situation in the UK. But what happened was because that anti-competition laws kicked in, that single supplier had to actually subcontract to multiple suppliers, and they were the one who were actually competing and taking a cut on their own returns. And that's how we have like multiple suppliers in the UK now, that they are actually they end up like with dealing with the customers, and there's only one supplier at times, and they are selling off the service, and that's how the competition was created. So yeah, that was the exact situation, and could have been very well done in the U.S., but it's just simply courts are
So
not actually dealing with it.
California actually tried something like that. They tried to, I forgot what the term is. This is just a couple of years ago. Basically allow people to, choose their, where they would get their power from. But then they would have like there was like one transmission grid, but you could choose different suppliers, and basically California ended up going dark. Okay, I mean they ended up with like. Um,
Rolling blackout.
rolling
I remember.
blackouts,
Yep.
because
Yep.
they deregulated one part of the structure but not the other part, and it created a massive problem. I mean, there really isn't a reason that a single utility can't work. I can tell you just from my California experience, the municipally owned utilities, and there's one in Los Angeles and one in Sacramento, work better for the people than the privately owned ones. That's my own, and with a much lower cost. And that's
John, Ken, I'm just going to push back a little bit because growing up in the hood in Compton, LADP right now is the worst service, but I agree. It is a fair price and they won't cut you off and leave you stranded because I'm in Orange County now, if you don't pay your bill. But I think it's a balance, and that's all I'm simply saying. In the California thing, I remember when that happened, it was a lot of political sides on both sides in the protest. And so sometimes I wonder, was this a, cause and effect? Because these companies do make a lot of money, and they're public companies like SCE and Pacific Gas. And I'm still waiting for when Pacific Gas up north, as Chris said, they actually caused that big fire up there. Let's just see what the liability happens on that, because they said that the trees fell on their power lines that they didn't upgrade. And I don't know why they weren't upgrading because they were getting a lot of shareholder money. And let me be very clear, though. I'm sorry. I'm a capitalist. I'm, raising money for a startup. Don't get me wrong. I am pure money play. But there has to be a balance between how much is enough, and what do you do for the people you're
They
trying to build
killed
for.
those
That's all
people.
I'm saying.
They killed them by not upgrading their equipment. Like, let's just be honest about that.
They
Like,
went bankrupt, I believe. By the way, they
yeah,
didn't.
but
They're still
but
operating.
sort of they went bankrupt. I mean, they're negotiating all that nonsense. I mean, as you know, Ken, like when these things go bankrupt, when they also have to keep providing the utility services, it's kind of a complicated mix, right? So I
Well, yeah,
remember,
but I didn't follow the bankruptcy, but a typical bankruptcy doesn't mean the company dies. Your shareholders generally get wiped out. Your creditors become your shareholders. I don't know what happened there because I didn't follow it that closely, but bankruptcy doesn't necessarily mean
yeah,
liquidation. Yeah.
there's a weird part of the bankruptcy code in California when it comes to utilities. And that was like a big thing. They hired like Attorney General Bill Lockyer. This is kind of more detail than people wanted, but basically, you could talk about the grid in Texas going down because it was too cold. You could talk about, all the other kind of issues that we've had all throughout the country on these kind of blackouts issues. But yeah, I mean, I do wonder if we might be better served by implementing some of the British style policies. And by the way, like those of us who have had solar panels on our houses or have like actually gone to basically make our homes more energy efficient, weatherize them, whatever. There really should be, tax advantages that we get for making these upgrades ourselves. Or, cities could be, should be properly incented here. I mean, there's a lot of things we could do if we wanted to, but I do wonder, why it is. And it usually just comes down to money.
A
Well,
related,
part of the problem, by the way, when if you get like people who can afford to do solar and everything, you get enough people off the grid, and also, by the way, companies have left the grid out here in Las Vegas. Many of the big casino companies have left the grid, and they're getting their own energy. They had to pay a fee to the local utility to get out, but it wasn't just about the greed of the utility being investor owned. It had to do that utility also serves a lot of poor people, okay, who can't afford to get off the grid. Okay, so you have to make sure there's enough money to provide electricity, okay, for the average person, that you don't completely collapse the system. So I mean, it's a balancing act.
check out Trine. My buddy Sam in Sweden, and Trine is building microgrids across Africa that anyone can invest in and earn. I think he's claiming that the average is 8% interest, and he always has a dozen upcoming projects in different countries around Africa where he goes in and builds a solar powered grid for a community, and then you become the utility company and you earn they charge, I think, a 10%. But what it does is it brings power to communities that don't have power or irreliable power, and they become a dependable power source. Or it's where
Yeah,
places where people
I
are.
was going to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that it's actually interesting. Like, I think that's great work that your friend's doing, and just kind of a bit of nuance in Africa is that you have to remember that some countries have different rural energy laws. So in Tanzania, we have a rural energy agency that promotes solar and folks coming in and doing decentralized grid. Whilst in Kenya, which is only 4 hours away in the north of me, the grid has a lot more power. The Kenya National Grid, and they impose limits and regulations to how big you can do. Can you do microgrids for a village or not? You have to get special licenses. For me to do my solar installation, which I've now happily had for almost a year, I didn't have to pay anyone or talk to anyone or get any permission. I could do whatever size I wanted. The grid just comes in and it's grid tied, so I've grid connected. But it's interesting when the grid guys come here and look at a problem, they always like, wow, this is impressive. And it's they're like, oh, you have power. I'm like, yeah, I have power. I'm not depending on you. I'm just mixing the two up. Right. But the other thing here is that in Tanzania is like the grid quality is not great. The voltage varies dramatically. When the power surges, it comes really, really bad. And it destroys electronics. And it can be quite hard to convince people to switch, even if they have the money. But my dad, I told him, like, How many electronics have you lost in the last 2 or 3 years due to grid coming back? Even with power, you can't put a regulator on every single device. Some people try to, but even then, it can come back and destroy electronics. I think I've already made back my money just from the stuff I've been able to save. I've lost an Apple TV, an AV amplifier due to power surges. So the grid quality can also be a big driver. A lot of people want to go decentralized because, for an emerging market, it can be hard for them to maintain a legacy grid that hasn't been upgraded in like a long, long time. I mean, I think in Africa, we've had like a deficit for a long, long time. I mean, Obama tried to solve this a little bit with Power Africa, investing a ton with GE and others coming in. But yeah, maintenance, state running, and Africa, and also just Nigeria is actually even worse, right? I'm talking about Tanzania, Nigeria. If there's any Nigerians in the room, Nigeria, you're lucky to have 3 hours of grid power in the center of town. The whole Lagos is just generator central, right? And you can just see all the solar companies coming in and offering a better an alternative to make it easier. But it just depends which country, how supportive they are of the off-grid transition.
Speaking of this, an article from The Guardian that Shrog sent in says big tech's pro-climate rhetoric is not matched by policy action. A report finds tech companies poured $65 million into lobbying in 2020, but only 6% of their lobbying is targeted at climate policies. So they're talking a very big game about climate, but not really putting it into a whole lot of action. The metaverse is a clean slate for the ad industry post the cookie apocalypse, which is a great point. With the looming death of cookies, brands must double down in creating authentic relationships with their current and potential customers. And the metaverse seems like the ideal place for brands to evolve relationships in a post-cookie world. A really interesting article that Dr. Fran sent in, and I just tweeted out to the Tech News Twitter account. The next one is, speaking of cookies, how about M&Ms? BB and others send in this one from Nikkei Japan, that Hong Kong police have seized M&Ms as a national security threat. The police force alleged that these youth activists who are 18, 19, 20-year-olds have incited subversion in posing a threat to national security in distributing M&Ms to the political prisoners. So, and this is being widely reported in Hong Kong. Why are these M&Ms being seized? That these basically students who get arrested for national security issues because they were protesters, now their friends outside of jail are sending them M&Ms. And then the police are seizing the M&Ms, saying that this gives the people inside the jail political power amongst the other prisoners, and that it's in causing a disruption to the prison system. And
it'd be like trading cigarettes, right?
but you're allowed to send gifts to people in prison. But once those people have those gifts, it gives them a currency to influence the other prisoners. And then what they worry is that they could cause a sort of prison riot based on an M&M revolution. So they're confiscating the M&Ms.
Damn, that's smart, Ty. I didn't think about it in that way, like Chris with cigarettes, but it's a way to communicate. Gosh, like it's almost like cryptocurrency. And so people would then know what's really going on. Well, if in Hong Kong these systems couldn't talk to each other because they're probably segregated.
It's interesting.
They're color coded too. So they have a way of hierarchy, right? And and then I was laughing about this. Like, if you've seen what a carton of cigarettes costs right now, that is money.
So Cheryl sends
$100 for a carton of cigarettes.
Speaking of Japan, Cheryl sends in one from Asahi Japan, which is also one of Japan's biggest publications. Asahi Shimbun, it's about Japan police to increasingly partner up with AI to fight crime. Whether the criminal activity you're dealing with is money laundering, stalking, or selling drugs on social media, AI is coming for you as Japan's police partner up with more with the increasing efficiency of multitasking technologies like AIs. And by the way,
Good.
the Japanese,
Get them.
Japan loves technology. Japan loves good policing. They have no problem with this. This makes all the sense in the world from a Japanese perspective. And by the way, don't ever fuck with Japanese police. Those dudes know what's going on in their neighborhoods. My lord.
That's the biggest gang there is.
What?
The Japanese police.
I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying they are very well informed individuals. They intend Japanese immigration as well. They, unlike American immigration officers, Japanese immigration officers are highly intelligent individuals and highly trained, and they know what they are looking for, and they are very, very savvy. And the Japanese police are also very well trained, very savvy. And more than people would imagine. And
I would just add to that is if you're a Westerner or from any part of the world, don't smoke your cigarette or cigar. My ex-wife was Japanese, and throw it on the ground. Your ass will be in so much trouble than you could even spin. Even if it's a curve and you're like, well, I'm just going to put it in the sewer. You can't do that on the curve. You cannot put any litter on the ground in Tokyo.
Yeah, I think you could. Well, I don't know. The next one is somebody sends in an update on the Theranos case that's happening, and a former Theranos chemist says that the CEO, Elizabeth Holmes, was aware of testing failures, which means she's a psychopath. As what this comes down to. Is this was the big question. Did she actually know that she was selling snake oil, or was she told that it works and she's passing that along? And it turns out that the scientists in the background were really the ones to blame for, the lies that this house of cards was built on. And it turns out that the chemists are saying, no, she very well knew. And she was, spreading those lies knowingly and to investors and the public and everything else. So looks like she's going to spend time behind bars is what that amounts to.
Maybe she could learn how to deal with the M&Ms in the prison.
Yeah.
So Evan sends in one that a Texas city to offer Samsung large property tax breaks to build a $17 billion chip plant. The city of Taylor, Texas, one of two locations in the state under consideration by Samsung for a $17 billion chip plant, plans to offer extensive property taxes as they would. That's a, geographies compete for these things, just like Tesla factories, just like big chip factories. Jurisdictions compete all the time. Stockholm competes with Copenhagen and Oslo for data centers. This stuff happens all the time, and they do end up trying to entice people. Dublin was competing with every other capital in Europe for all the big American tech companies who wanted to have offices in the EU. Dublin got them.
I'm sorry, Tyler. Where is that in Texas?
Taylor, Texas. Not to be confused with Tyler, Texas. Totally different city. This one has an A after the T. So Evan sends in another one that surging fertilizer costs risk making food even pricier next year. If you think food's getting expensive now, just wait. Most people don't give fertilizer a second thought, except maybe when driving through a particularly fragrant agriculture area. But with surging fertilizer costs, inevitably the food prices are going to have to go up as well. And BB sends in this one from Reuters. China wealth plans threaten European luxury stocks like LVMH. What this means is Uncle Xi is telling everyone we need to redistribute the wealth, and people are taking that as a sign to not be flaunting luxury goods, which China has been causing an absolute boom for luxury brands in recent years, making LVMH's founder the richest man in the world momentarily, above even Bill Gates and Elon Musk. And LVMH has been booming due to China in recent years, but now LVMH shares are the lowest in many months, and it looks like things might be turning dark for the big luxury brands because China culturally is kind of distancing itself from the luxury brands because we need to redistribute the wealth and not be flaunting wealth and etc. China's stuttering economy recovery and plans to redistribute wealth threatens to derail Europe's booming luxury sector. Okay, next up is from Renjant from India. Amazon has launched an investigation into the conduct of its legal representatives, meaning its lawyers in India, following a complaint that one or more of the country's legal representatives had been bribing government officials. So Amazon's launching an investigation into the conduct of its lawyers in India following a complaint from a whistleblower who alleged that bribes were being paid. Well, this, as I'm told, this tea money thing is not so uncommon in India. It's kind of a well understood thing that to make things happen expeditiously, if you want things to happen, sometimes there's a little tea money involved.
Yeah, like Reliance.
Well, I mean, this is, I think, I'll leave it to our Indian friends to comment, but this is kind of a well understood aspect of doing business in India. The tea money. And now India's.
It's like when you go to TJ, you got to bring, put $20 in your sock just to pay off the cop in case you get stopped.
Or a $5 fake Rolex could work every time. So
I was extremely disappointed after spending like 6 months in Guatemala when I was 17. When I came back to the U.S., that I could not just pay the police officer $50 when he pulled me over. That was a lesson I learned only once in America, but I didn't need to learn it twice.
So Dr. Fran sends in an interesting one about Fortnite, the big video game where kids build their own virtual worlds, is joining with Balenciaga, luxury brand. Remember, we were just talking about the luxury brands are going to have a rough go of things growing in China because of the crackdown. And now the luxury brands are partnering with the metaverse. Like we were saying 3 articles ago, that brands in the post-cookie world need to embrace the metaverse and the virtual reality. And that's what this article is all about. Fresh off the runway, Balenciaga partners with Fortnite in a cutting-edge crossover experience. And then
I had a question for you, Tyler.
Yes.
Back on the previous article, when you said that the Chinese brands, so the LVMH and the
LVMH,
brands are starting, the LVMH are starting to decline, is that in part because the Chinese wealthy can't travel into Europe and go shopping in Paris and because typically when they come over to Europe, they're doing a lot of shopping, and is that the decline in sales? And do you think that to this current article that LVMH should be getting into the metaverse and creating brands online, and so that people don't have to travel to experience and physically buy the products?
That could be part of it. Except the LVMH stores are in China, and they're in Hong Kong is a huge LVMH store. Essentially, I mean, Hong Kong is one big LVMH brand store after another in Central on Hong Kong Island, anyways. And so they don't have to go far for LVMH products.
But they have a lot of surrogate buyer. They call it 代购. They actually go, Japan, in Europe to actually buy a lot of all these luxurious products, because for people in China, those wealthy ones, they prefer to buy those that originated overseas because they are still suspicious about the authenticity of those that is in China.
True, that's very true.
So I think with this, COVID definitely have a big impact on the luxury goods sales. Because
Cheryl's right. When you take the train from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, as you exit the station in mainland China, you're met by this building that is just completely filled with what's the word? The fake goods, which, by the way, are undetectable. I've sat and scrutinized legitimate goods next to the fake goods. I think they're being made from the same factory. So that, and this is like you're buying it from a street vendor, who has these Tom Ford sunglasses that are identical in every way to your own Tom Ford sunglasses, or your Tumi backpack that you paid, $400 for, and they're selling it for $35. And it's identical. And you have the two items next to each other, and you cannot tell the difference. So it's I can understand why they might be hesitant to buy luxury goods in China. They want to go buy it in Europe, where they feel it's a safer purchase. So Cheryl has an article from the Next Web. What does Facebook mean when it says it supports internet regulations? But and this is from the Next Web. Why is Facebook pushing for regulations, quote unquote, that would curb its own power? And what exactly are the regulations it supports? Well, the reason is because Facebook and the big tech companies, these regulations get applied. The regulations that get applied to everybody, they're generally in favor for, because they have the resources to deal with those new regulations. Making tech and innovation harder to do and more restrictive, and making compliance more difficult, that puts pressure on everybody in the industry. They have the financial resources and the brain power in the teams to overcome those frictions. And the smaller players do not. So it gives them an advantage when these blanket regulations come into place. They don't like singular regulations against their company specifically, of course. But if they're applied broadly, they generally can be in favor of them. So the next one's from Katerina, that scientists create holograms you can touch. University of Glasgow scientists have created a hologram system that uses jets of air, known as aerohaptics, to replicate the sensation of touch. And I've talked about this, about a startup from Stockholm who gave one of the most mind-blowing startup pitches I have ever seen in my life, which is touch screens for ordering your next Happy Meal at McDonald's, where you can click the screen without touching the screen and feel the click with your fingers, with these tiny speakers embedded under the screen. I mean, minuscule, and they can move air. They're moving air more than sound, and they create a haptic sensation on your finger, so you can feel the actual click of the screen without actually touching the screen, which is nice because you're going to eat French fries with those fingers, and you don't want to share those viruses from the touchscreen. So speaking of sunglasses, Ranjan sends in an article from TechCrunch that Facebook is being warned over the very small LED indicator on their new Ray-Ban smart glasses, which record photos and videos. And Facebook's lead privacy regulator in Europe has raised concerns about a pair of smart Ray-Ban sunglasses the tech giant's now selling, that the glasses include this little too small LED indicator to let people know when they're being recorded. So the EU wants a bigger LED light to make it more obvious that people are being recorded. So what's going to happen? Maybe Facebook should have shown them a prototype before they went live with it in the EU. The next one from the New York Times is bad.
It's almost like I was going to say it's almost like the future isn't privacy, as Mark Zuckerberg says. I don't know. We'll see.
The New York Times headline says, "Is bad indoor air dulling your brain?" Well, that would explain what's going on. While we tend to worry about inhaling viral particles like coronavirus, new research shows that air quality at work may have a subtle effects on cognitive abilities. You're breathing bad air and it's dulling your pickled brain. I think we've figured it out, everybody. We've cracked the case on why people are losing their goddamn minds. It's the bad air.
Well, the other piece to that is that it can just be stale air, but it can also be, paint that has emissions, that we're breathing in. So it makes all the sense. Yeah.
So Alexandra sends in one. Facebook knows Instagram harms teens. Now it plans to open the app for kids. Looks worse than ever. Facebook knows that Instagram harms teens. Now it plans to open the Instagram for kids for under 13. It's just incredibly bad timing. And that's why what this is talking about is the Wall Street Journal published a powerful multi-part series on the company. And one of the articles in that series last week was about how Instagram knows that Instagram's bad for young ladies. And yet Instagram wants to launch an Instagram app for kids. And so there's now senators saying, no, you shouldn't do that. So it'll be interesting to see if they move forward now that senators are saying they shouldn't do it. And Cami sends in one from Psychology Today. Is Cami, you want to, this AI and optogenetics disrupt the neuroscience of dopamine? Vanderbilt University finds that dopamine is more than just a pleasure molecule.
She should be sleeping by now, no?
Oh, yeah, probably. Okay. So I will retweet that one out. And then I still have, shame on me, 14 hours more tweets to get through, but we will get through those when we meet next time in, what do we say, 5.5 hours. So hopefully you can join us. If not, join us tomorrow. And